All right, here we go.
All
Here
right.
we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to episode 69. For all you teenagers out there, Joe,
Yep.
get your chuckle in. 69 is happening. So I'm joined this evening with U.S. or Ohio Army National Guard retired Lieutenant Colonel Christopher Call. We go by Chris, right?
Yeah, Chris. Yeah.
I was going to call you that anyway. So
that's fine.
But thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for signing up. Thanks for Mike, who's in the audience, for getting you in here.
My wingman over there.
Yeah, he's over there. He brought a wingman, which is always good. But so like I said, thanks for coming in.
Sure.
Looking forward to sitting down and chatting.
Yeah.
We got another Ohio guy though.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much the entire, from the time I was about 2, I guess.
So you don't claim Chicago as being where you're from?
No, I'm from Columbus. I grew up in Worthington, so that's really where I kind of call my roots from. But I was born in Chicago. My dad grew up there, lived there. My parents lived there for a couple of years before I was born, and then I was born there, and then they moved pretty quickly to Atlanta, and I think we spent maybe a year or so down there, and then moved to Columbus and lived in Worthington Estates actually for a couple of years, and then we moved to the little village I lived in called Riverly. I think when I was probably between 3 and 4, somewhere around there. And then, I grew up in that little village there, just south of 161 off of High Street.
So any brothers and sisters? I
have a sister. She is 4 years younger than me. She lives in Worthington now too. Married her high school sweetheart. They had 2 kids. I got a niece and a nephew from my sister there. Both are one will graduate from college this year, and the other one's sophomore at Kentucky. So, just grew up. Grew up a Columbus kid. My niece and nephew are awesome. My niece is she's a wild one. She's pretty. How would you call it? Precocious, even at age 20, whatever she is, 20 now, I think, something like that. But she's pretty much just like my sister, like chip off the old block kind of thing. You know what I mean? So
I feel like my sister's daughter is the same way. My niece is the same way.
Yeah.
They look alike.
They do.
The time
alike, act
alike,
alike, speak alike, have the same loud voice that I remember when I was a kid that drove me bananas. So, but I love her. She's a great kid. She's awesome. So, and my nephew's a good kid. He's at Cincinnati and making his way through there. Hopefully should be graduating this year and off to bigger and brighter things, I guess, down the road. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And 2 kids yourself. Well, before we get that, what was growing up like? What's young Chris into?
So I was so it's kind of funny. It's funny that I ended up in the military, but I grew up, kind of small town vibe in our little village, but Worthington, is a fairly good, suburban city in Columbus, obviously, but lived on this nice little street. We had a little, sort of, I don't want to call it a roundabout. It was essentially a roundabout though, but we called it the Island, and we'd go down there and, hang out with the kids in the neighborhood and play all kinds of sports, baseball, football, whatever. Anything we could, kick the can, riding our bikes, all that stuff that kids do back in the time when I was growing up. So, effectively the 70s and the 80s, I graduated from high school in 88. So I'm a Gen Xer, I guess. And so we were kind of like, just go out and stay outside until it's dark and then, come home for dinner at some point. But
those were the days, weren't they?
Yeah, it was great. And we didn't have all the technology and things like that to distract us from just going out and having fun and being kids. So, got a lot of the outdoors in that way. But, after, I think when I was probably in 2nd grade or so, I started getting a bunch of allergies and ended up getting asthma and, was sick all the time, which kind of sucked because, my friends would be outside playing and stuff. I'd be stuck inside, wheezing and stuff like that. I can't get up the stairs. But eventually that kind of grew out of that when I was probably about 12 or so. So got over a lot of the allergies and things like that, which was great. And I could start doing, normal stuff and not worrying about, not being able to walk up down the stairs. So I just had a lot of fun. Great neighborhood. Got a lot of great friends from that neighborhood still. Actually, one of them lives probably about 2 miles from me still. And we ride bikes. We still like cycle together. We do Peloton every so often. Been doing that for many years, but kind of got away from it the last couple of years, but we'll probably get back on the horse, so to speak, again soon. So yeah, just, great experience growing up. My mom and my dad were divorced when I was in second grade. So, that kind of sucked for a little while. I didn't really remember too much of it, why or any of that kind of stuff, or really remember them fighting or anything. But just like at one point, my dad wasn't living in the house anymore, and he was living in an apartment over at Changi Commons, of all places. So I'd see him on Sundays, and then it was just kind of that way all through my elementary school days and high school days. And then my dad worked here in Columbus for a couple title agencies. So started with Chicago Title when he was in Chicago, and then kind of evolved into a couple other companies while he was here in Columbus, worked downtown. And so we had a relationship. It wasn't bad, but once a week seeing your dad is kind of, it's not enough necessarily. So that was kind of a bummer.
You think that affected you? Like that, you look back at that at all now? And
yeah, I mean, I think
changed you as a dad, or just
I think probably certainly with my commitment to my wife and our marriage, right? I mean, I think growing up with a single mom, effectively, and separated parents, you don't want to put your kids through that. So I think that definitely affected how I approached marriage and my my commitment to it. You know what I mean? So, that's I didn't want to do that to my kids. Now, did that make me a better dad? I don't know. You'd have to ask my kids that, I think. But, I think some of the things I probably took from my dad that aren't so great, or, some of his temper and things like that. Right. But, so he tended to resolve things with screaming and yelling and that kind of stuff, and maybe get a swat on the ass every once in a while. But, I tried not to do that, although I know I failed at that. Quite a bit. But,
I didn't get the yelling from my dad. I got it from my mom. So
yeah,
it's always
I got that too.
You get it from somewhere.
Yeah.
It's hard to, I'll fight with that every day. So,
and then growing up basically with two women in the house was, with no sort of male figurehead, that also affected me in a way that I think, made me a little bit more understanding of the female side of the world, I guess. So, not saying I was super sensitive or anything like that, but I just had a different perspective on things because my mom was, teaching me all the lessons. She taught me how to throw a baseball practically, and, throw the lacrosse ball, which I got into later in my life. And, so she was around. She worked for greeting card companies and was a sales rep. And then she ended up becoming a realtor later in her life. And she was very successful as a realtor, and just a hard worker. Never complained about anything, and just awesome mom. So we had a really good childhood, I think. I would say overall, never really wanted for anything, and both my parents were supportive of us, but again, like I said, my dad was just a little bit more distant because I just didn't see him as frequently. But we had a good relationship for the most part. But it just was tough that way. So yeah.
So any childhood heroes? We my last guest was the same age as we are.
Yeah.
He threw out a lot of movies. I was like, okay, yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'd say like locally, I was always a Buckeye fan, right? So
I'm sorry.
Hey man, we won the national championship.
Oh, I know.
It's all good, right? So no, I think one of my heroes back then, which is kind of funny, you sort of understand his history, was Art Schlichter, right? The quarterback at Ohio State, who ended up being a horrible, human being. He was gambling and, stealing money from people, and was a total dirtbag after college. But he was like, the quarterback at Ohio State in that era. So I always looked up to him. And then I'd say my mom grew up in Pittsburgh. And so I was a Steelers fan. My grandfather, kind of going back to my childhood, my grandfather was the headmaster of Swickley Academy, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh. And so my mom grew up going to school at this academy, and private school. And so we would go for the holidays. We'd go there every year and visit my cousins who also lived in Pittsburgh. So I was a Steelers fan back in the 70s, when they were winning Super Bowls and stuff, and Terry Bradshaw and Mean Joe Green and the, Steel Curtain and all those guys. So those were probably some of my sports heroes. And then I also was fascinated with, Neil Armstrong and, being 69, I was born in 69. So the year we landed on the moon and all that. And being an Ohioan, John Glenn, those guys, right? So as far as that goes, those were some of my childhood heroes. Art, Woody Hayes for sure. That he had, some of his quotes I used a lot, for some of my leadership philosophies and things like that. You win with people, as Woody would kind of coin that phrase. And so people like that, I think, revolved around sports in a lot of ways. Roberto Clemente, I always wore number 21 when I played sports. So he was a Pittsburgh Pirate. So I'd say those are some of the people that sort of shaped my image of what, cool was like back in the day. I'd watch the $6 Million Man, right? Lee Majors, and I think I even had a T-shirt that says $6 Million Man on it, and stuff like that.
The TV shows always make me laugh because just recently we were down in Kentucky at an Airbnb with some guys that are younger, and we started watching Knight Rider, I think, A-Team, and like we'd been drinking a little bit, so a little bit nostalgic, and then these guys are like, do you guys really think this is good? And I'm like, this is great.
It's
and then
best.
You don't want to admit you're kind of like,
it's kind of cheesy.
It's fucking awesome. Some of it was like, it's like bad, but you're like, we had no choice, right?
No,
like it was a big deal. Knight Rider was coming on.
Yeah, 3 channels, like a 4 channels, maybe if you had the PBS channel. Or
compared to today's, it's not that great, but back then, hell yeah, it was cool, man.
Space 1999. I don't know if you remember that one. That might be way early. That was
I was big A-Team, and then you start to realize if you watch A-Team now, none of them could shoot. Nobody in the tires.
Yeah, then nobody would die.
Yeah, like G.I. Joe cartoon, the same way. I mean, there's all kinds of rounds going down range. No one's getting hit ever, but they could shoot out tires perfectly. It was like
pinpoint on the valve stem, even right. I mean, like that kind of. But you can't hit a dude. It's 5 feet away from you. Right?
Yeah, but I think those shows. The interesting about them is like what I think was great about them. It was like good storytelling, right? And then it was like some stuff with like character development, and you really started to like. Yeah.
I mean, and I like as I grew up too, like. Magnum PI and I watched late night with David Letterman all through high school. I would always stay up till like 1 o'clock in the morning. My mom would be yelling at me, "You got to go to sleep. You got to get up." Stuff like that. But yeah, movies. Star Wars 78, 77, whenever it came out, I was definitely at the Raintree Theaters over there off of Morse Road. That's where I saw that movie. I remember that. Movies like Platoon and like those kind of movies to me were fascinating back then, and all those kind of things that we grew up with. It
was a different time. What I can't figure out though is as much as we had all this freedom and we were doing whatever we wanted, and like I'm still paranoid with my youngest son who went down to last night in the bad weather. I'm like, you don't need to go. And you're like all worried about it, and then like 30 minutes later, I'm like. What the hell is wrong with me? I would have been like, why is he lipping off of me about this? I'm like, I would have been so pissed if my dad would have been like, you can't drive in the snow. I'm like, no, you can't do that. You need to make a better decision. And I'm like,
I thought about some of the stuff like, as a kid growing up, I had, I loved BMX bikes, right? I had a Schwinn BMX bike, and then I had a paper route. So I was doing newspapers, and I made enough money to buy a frame, and I bought a frame and I built it and, put like spoke mag wheels on there and stuff, and like bent back handlebars and sloped seat posts and all that stuff, right? Like ET had come out, and so like that bike was the cool Kuwahara bike, right? And so I went to I would ride my other bike down to Como Bike and Mower from Worthington, which is down like off of North Broadway, which it's like a few miles, and I would just ride down there on my own at 12 or whatever with cash in my hand, going to buy some grips at the, you know what I mean? Or whatever. And so I had, like you look back and like, my mom didn't even know where I was probably. Right. So,
but I think that's the key though. That's what I was going to say is like, I definitely like, I think my parents probably did give me like a range of where we couldn't leave, but like the amount of times that I left that range was significant. And the only way you got caught is if somebody saw you. So like, so maybe they weren't as paranoid because they're like, oh, he's only a couple miles away. Little do they know, you've driven down a highway 6 miles to get ice cream at Cumberland Farms. And then, you only got busted when someone was like, hey, I think I saw Shay and his friends on the road on the bike. And your parents be like, no, they wouldn't do that. And you're like, did you do that? And you're like,
dude. Yeah, I mean,
no, there must have been because like today they're taking pictures of you and shit. You're busted. I'm like, no, we would never ride on the road.
I didn't do that.
No,
we would ride through this apartment complex that was just south of and it was so like you think about some of the crazy people that are out there like snatching kids up these days, right? And we would ride our bikes through, like we had a dead end at the end of this boulevard at the end of our street, and you'd ride back into the woods through, like, it was cool because we were on, our dirt bikes or BMX bikes, riding through the creeks and stuff and going to wherever we were going. And we'd come out in this shitty apartment complex, and there were some shady characters, that lived over there. And, I just think about like who was hanging out in the woods stalking people back then. Maybe there was somebody out there. I don't know. Never had any encounters, but other than just some random dude, every once in a while, like, that guy was weird. Let's go, get out of here, But nowadays I'd be freaking out. So
but it's interesting because I look back at those. We had a guest on last year, Dr. Brian. He was talking about during that time frame you saw a lot of low suicide rates then, and things were going on just in the world. What was different about that time? And you look at it and you're like, I have it that there was all these bad things we're having. We just didn't know about them. Yeah, but then for us is like, you're right. We weren't connected to our devices, and we you had to go out and do stuff. There was there's no way to connect other than to be with people. Right. And then the time, you were talking about, people waiting in the woods. Like, I can't tell you how many times we just went out in the woods and hung out in the woods and just sat around and bullshitted and totally played whatever games, played hide and seek, just doing all kinds of stuff. And I don't know. And I felt like for me, it's like, there was it was the opportunity to have boundaries, but to push the boundaries. Like you knew if you were, if I got caught riding down the road there, it was going to be pretty bad. Right. But you're like, fuck it, we're gonna do this. I mean, and
because we were like, it's group thing too. Like, you get a bunch of guys together and you're like, oh, let's fucking go.
So I don't know if it's like our parenting is now because we knew everything we did, right? So we're a little bit because I look back and there's a couple times I'm like, man, that could have gone really bad, right?
I mean, just I'm trying to think of some examples of we would go swimming in the Olentangy River, and I was a good swimmer. I swam since I was, in second grade or whatever. But you swim around this murky water in this nasty river, and who knows what could happen.
Oh no! So we used to have the swamp, and we used to go out there because it was a military post. So everyone, we played Army all the time. And you go out there and you're definitely wading in some stuff that's oh, God only knows what. No one knows how deep this is. You got a guy who's like, I can't swim. You're like, stop, shut the fuck up. Just come on.
Just put on the stick.
Dude. Don't tell. Right. Then somebody almost drowns. You're like, don't tell your mom because then you'll be in trouble. Just all this shit was So I feel like that's how I am. Dude. I'm always like, oh my God.
I went down the end of my street. I had this friend of mine. His name is Richard Rank. Sorry, Richard, if you're listening, he'll never be listening. But anyway, his parents were super uber Christian. He ended up going to Worthington Christian, I think, for school. And so he had pretty strict parents in that way. But his dad had this is insane. He had some black powder in his garage, right? So we're like, oh, let's make a cherry bomb. And we got this CO2 canister, punched a hole, I think it was already expended or whatever. We made the hole bigger, poured black powder in it, and then put a wick in there from a firecracker, right? It's I don't know how I have all my fingers at this point, but we somehow strung a couple of wicks together and then stuck it in there and then lit it and ran up the hill, and it detonated, and it was so loud. I thought, his mom came out and was super pissed at us, but I don't know how we didn't die. If we had stayed down there and watched it, we'd have been all messed up. So.
Yeah, I just wonder how, if you go back and think about them, it's we used to play war with BB guns, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was like the 3-pump rule,
Totally.
which really meant you pumped it like 12 times.
Yeah,
and if
of
you didn't
course.
like somebody, it was like
Yeah.
25 times.
Yeah.
And there was like, you know, it's funny as you get in the military, it's like the danger, like the close where you're just like, you know, you're dead. Yeah. I accidentally meant to shoot you. And I just remember a kid who was sitting there and like, did he accidentally shoot the guy?
No.
Probably not, but he fucking launched a BB through his shot through his pants and like right into like it just missed an artery. Like, I mean, it was like, seriously. And then the first thing is like, don't tell your, how are you not telling your parents that you got to like you got to get that out?
My experience with BB gun wars in my backyard, my good friend from high school was Chris Robb. So we had this like deck off our back porch with a hot tub, and it was pretty sweet. And then we had this like little small patio, and there was a set of French doors in between the deck and the patio. And then my mom's desk was on the other side. So it was like this little U-shaped area. And I had sort of retreated to this space in between these areas. And my buddy came running across and fired at me. Of course he missed, right? Cause he's moving, I'm stationary, and he hits the French doors. And it was that safety glass, and it just went, you know, spiraled all, you know, splintered everywhere. And my mom is on the phone with somebody. I don't remember who she was talking to, but she was so fucking mad. She I could see her from the inside get up out of her chair with a phone, you know, like the old corded phone. And she was like, I'm doing this kind of thing. And I couldn't hear her exactly, but I knew she was pissed. And then, you know, of course I ended up having to pay for it. It was like $100 back then. So that was a lot of money to me. But fortunately I had a paper out, so I paid for it. But it was just like, how the hell did we survive? One of the other funny stories in my backyard. I was a little younger, but I had this friend over from down the street, and we're in the backyard, and my dad had found this hornet's nest in the fence post. We had this like ranch fence in the backyard, and he's like, oh, let's find something, you know, see if we can find the bees or whatever. He takes this hammer and he chucks it into the hole, and I'm standing there like a dumbass, you know, like watching him do it, and I don't move. So he runs, right? And then the bees swarmed me, and I got stung like 100 times, you know, and I was all fucked up. My mom was like, you know, I was crying, you know, and this dude ran away, and, you know, my mom's putting like baking soda and shit all over me. And, you know, it was just horrible, but it was, you know, that's the stuff that, like, you know, sort of builds character for you over your life. And those are those experiences as a kid that I really like, I remember most. They're usually traumatic, but yeah, so it's always fun back there in Riverley. It's a good time.
Yeah. It's surprising that more of us didn't not make it through the 80s, 70s, totally. And 80s. I mean, it's I feel like it's gotten worse. Maybe it'll be different when my kids get older, but like when I talk to people like grew up in the 70s, they're like, you know, like one guy at work is like, shit, 12 years old, we just took my parents' car. Yeah, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, we wait till they went to sleep, and you just freaking drive around there. I'm like who was with you? A bunch of other 12-year-olds. And I'm like, what the like what? I mean, like, that's like, I never did that.
I mean, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. And then just all the stuff that was going on. You're like, yeah, whatever. You know, we did that. I'm like, whoa, okay.
It wasn't like that crazy.
I mean, sneaking out of the house, it was all like, I mean, like if you're doing that now, man, you don't have cameras, or you're like, I mean, I don't know how you're doing that. Like,
oh, I don't know now. Yeah.
I mean, we got apps to know garage doors open.
Life 360, you know, and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
they're on lockdown.
Yeah. But it's funny because when my oldest, went to college, she was in New York City and stuff. And we dropped her off. It was during COVID. And so we're like, we dropped her off. She was in her dorm. We went to the hotel, and then we were going to meet her for dinner. And so, like, I was making sure she was safe. I'm tracking her from, you know, Life 360. Right. And so I can see that she's coming around the corner, and I'm looking down the road, and there she comes, and she's just like walking like she's, you know, back on the block at home, not a care in the world. And I'm like, oh, she's gonna be fine. And then she's like, Dad, you can't have Life 360 on me anymore. I'm like, you know, like,
you're like, right. Oh yes, I can.
Yeah, but yeah. So I was like, so I was forced to drop her, and I still don't have her on there anymore. But she's you know, she's fine. But she's
it is an interesting time. I mean, like I'm guilty of it. You know. Just last night, it's funny when you think about it. I acted like we should be free and doing all kind of stuff, and I'm freaking out about a snowstorm that didn't even come. It's like,
yeah, right. I know.
I'm worried about him. And
just an example. You know, speaking of snowstorms, when it would snow when I was a kid, here's my mom, she would be like, all right, we're going to go outside, again, getting us outside. It's dark. It's night. It's snowing. She hooks up a rope to the back of the freaking Chevy Celebrity that we had. And this aluminum saucer, I don't know if you remember those things, right? She hooked that thing on there, or maybe hold on to the rope, and drove me around the neighborhood, drifting the saucer behind the car. You know what I mean? So she would turn a corner. I would just go, like a water, tube on a boat or whatever. It was hilarious. So, I mean, just like, who does that? My mom did that. Now you wouldn't do that stuff. You're like, no, I can't do it. The cops will pull me over or something,
Yeah. You'd be going like, it's just an interesting
child
time.
endangerment. What are you doing?
Yeah. There's it's funny. I was all worried about this ice storm, right? And everybody said, like, literally this morning I leave, and the little hill down by my house, I skid to that. So I call, my wife and tell, like, be careful when you go down. And then I get to work, and there's the parking spot. There's like a cement barrier in front of it, and I go to stop, and it's all ice. So I literally miss hitting. So I almost skid into the intersection over there. Then I maybe like 6 inches from bashing the car, and then I walk about 150 feet and just bite it on some ice. And I'm like, here I'm worried about everybody else. I'm like, I literally almost wrecked the car twice, and I luckily got my hand down, or I'd be a big old shiner.
Not anybody else, right?
Yeah, but the most important about falling, though, nobody saw it. That's all I care about today. It's like nobody witnessed it. So my pride's intact, which is good. So
yeah.
So you make it through high school.
Yeah.
Decide to head to the Ohio State University. How does that work out for you?
Does not work out well. I was a huge Buckeye fan growing up, so I always wanted to get to Ohio State. It was much easier to get into Ohio State back then. I didn't do badly in school. I was a good student. I'm smart, that kind of thing. But my study habits were not really well developed. And then, so my freshman year, I think I went early. I had to take some classes in the summer with a buddy of mine. We took a couple, we had to take there's like a general studies course that you take at Ohio State to kind of get you acclimated with the school. And then I think I signed up for sociology 101 or something like that. And so me and my buddy, kindergarten friend of mine, we're in the class together, and we met this dude. He was a little older than us, and he's like, yeah, well, I'm having a party, come over, whatever. We go there, and they're doing like flaming Dr. Peppers and all this shit, and I just drank beer in high school pretty much, right? So then I start getting in this like 100 proof, or it was 151. Basically it's 151 and beer, you light the thing on fire and fucking chug it. I did like 4 or 5 of those things, and I was destroyed. I remember like waking up in the backyard of this dude's house on campus somewhere. I have no idea where I was. And it was raining. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And my buddy's, he's hammered. This is back in the day when, drinking and driving was, it's horrible that we did this, but we did it.
I just want to go on record.
Yeah,
it was horrible, but we
don't condone this. This is not a good
kids,
thing
I did not do that ever.
Do not drink and drive. Okay. Yeah. But so we somehow make it back to my house. He pours me in the front door of the house, and I wake up in the morning, because I was still living at home. We were commuting, and I wake up in the morning. I'm ass naked, and all my sheets are on the floor, and there's puke everywhere. Right? And I'm like, oh Jesus, what the fuck happened? My dog was in there. I'm like, this is bad. And so I clean up, I go get a shower, and I'm like taking my sheets out of my room. She goes, well, my mom's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, our dog was Maggie. Maggie threw up on my bed last night. So I'm like, fucking trying to like cover up. And she never, I'm sure she knew that I was lying through my teeth, but she never called me out for it. But that was the start of my downfall at Ohio State, the first summer. Right. And then I'm 3 years into my studies, and I was just a horrible student. I just didn't go to class. Right. I could usually like wing it to a point. And so I would carry like C's and maybe a D or whatever. Right. And, after a while it just, accumulates. And so by year 3, I had about a year and a half worth of credits. And I was on academic probation. And so when you're on academic probation at Ohio State, you have to maintain a 2-point grade point average. And so I had I'd gotten through Spanish 105 was one of my classes, and I had chemistry and something else, right? And I remember going in the final for chemistry and walking in, and this proctor, he was one of the lab guys, right? I think he was Chinese or Japanese. I don't know. He was Asian of some form or other, right? And he's like, he looks at me, goes, "You're not in this class." I go, "Yes, I am."
Au contraire,
so I sit down and I completely failed the exam, right? So I get a shitty grade in my chemistry class. I get a shitty grade in the other class, but I got like a B. I think I might even had an A in the Spanish class. I was really good at language, and but because my attendance was so shitty, my professor took a whole letter grade off my final grade. And so by the time, like, you get your grades in the mail. So I went home, of course, and like intercepted that letter. And I found out that, I didn't get it. And then I got the letter that said you're academically dismissed from the university later. And that was like one of the worst days of my life to that point, right? Because I had to admit it to my mom that I'd been lying about how I was doing in school, and my dad, who was strict and, like, was pissed. I mean, he was, I couldn't even tell him. My mom had to tell him, I was so terrified of letting him know and let him know that I'd failed. So, at that point it was like, my dad was like, "Look, you can either get a job or you can join the military." And so, back then it was like, all right, well, how do I do that? I had recruiters, like a Marine Corps recruiter came in when I was at Ohio State, my sophomore year, or second year, I should say, not my sophomore year. Yeah, there was no progression. Okay?
I was academically a senior in high school.
I was a freshman plus at 3 years, right?
Kids are graduating from high school with
it was
more
bad.
college credits than you.
I'm like Tommy Boy, they went to school for 10 years. Those guys are called doctors, So I was just horrible. And but
for that, you said you were a bad student. I mean, were you partying? Obviously,
So after my freshman year, or at the end of my freshman year, I joined a fraternity. I was a delegate at Ohio State. So that's really where I got off track.
Yeah,
I was just trying to drink beer and chase girls and do all that kind of stuff. And so I just never go to class, and just, you can't do that. You know what I mean? It doesn't.
Well,
work.
in the movies you can do that. Right?
Yeah. So. I wasn't smart enough to like have people take tests for me or anything. I didn't have money to pay people to take tests. I was not crafty that way. So I just sucked. But so I get the letter, and then so when my dad confronted me with that, I was like, oh God, and back then, you had the yellow pages, right? You didn't have internet to Google how to join the military or whatever. So like I looked up in the yellow pages, like Army recruiters, and I didn't want to go active duty. I wasn't keen on doing that.
You weren't feeling that vibe?
Yeah. I just like, I was a little scared. And so I look up the Army Reserve recruiter on Morse Road. The building's still there. I could go there and probably find the office space. But so I go in there, I take the ASVAB and all that stuff. I do really well in the ASVAB, because again, I'm smart. I just don't apply myself very well in college. So they're like, yeah, you can pick whatever MLS you want. And this is like 91. It's post Gulf War. And so I was a little bit patriotic after the Gulf War. It was like April. I think I joined in April of 91. Yeah, April 23rd. So it was, a couple months after the war had ended, but, there's still stuff going on and things were happening. So I kind of wanted to, maybe do that or whatever. And it kind of inspired me a little bit. But so and then computers were still pretty new. And so I was like, oh, maybe I want to do something with computers, right? And recruiters, they fucking like, they're like, yeah, this has computers right here, right? So this female recruiter, she's like, yeah, well, you got this 75 Foxtrot, okay? And I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. And they pull out the big old DVD, like the old laser discs, stick it in the machine, and you sit there and you watch the video and you're like, oh, that's cool. There's like airborne computers.
That's a 75 Foxtrot.
Yeah, that's what you're going to do. You're going to jump out of airplanes with a tax machine, like all this stuff. And you're like, what the fuck is that? And so I'm like,
I forgot about those videos.
Oh yeah, they're hilarious, and like just super overproduced, like crappy, early 80s shit. So it's just low production value, horrible. So I'm like, okay, I'll do that. Right. So I go to Fort Dix, New Jersey for basic training. I remember flying, getting on the plane, going to MEPS, you do all that stuff, get on the plane, and I'm sitting there, I'm talking to this hot chick. She was like my age, and she was going to school or something like a normal person would. And I'm going to basic training. And so we're having a conversation about that. And then you get on the bus, and it's like Newark, land in Newark, and then you drive down south to Fort Dix. He knows Fort Dix pretty well.
Yeah, I've been to Dix before,
yeah. Mikey D's dad was a brigade commander over there. So anyway, go there and go through basic training, learned a little bit about a lot of different people from all over the world and all over the country. I mean, and, it was a little frightening at first, but you get through that first phase and then, my AIT was at Fort Ben Harrison.
So basic training, they said you met different people. What was the shocking thing about people meeting different people? Like what it's like, because if you, I don't know, I feel like it's just a time too. Like when you get thrown into, even if you know the internet, when you get thrown into that situation of basic training, like it's a
shocking.
different, there's, you're getting all kinds of
I mean, you get the swarm when you get off the bus and all that. And I remember we got there late and we were being marched to Chow. We went to the Chow Hall, and I think there was a female drill instructor that was marching us to Chow, and somebody whistled at her, and it was like immediate stop, get the fuck down, knock them out. Who the fuck said that kind of shit? You're like, oh my God, it was him. Like I didn't say it, but somebody was like, well, that motherfucker over there is a guy. It wasn't our fault. We didn't do shit. So we're just knocking them out, and then that was like, I was like, Jesus, this is going to suck. If people are dumb like that, we're fucked. So we go to Chow, and then you're in reception for a little while. So you start meeting people like, I went to a very, very ethnically, vanilla, literally, high school in Worthington High School. It was like, very, very few minorities in our high school. So I hadn't been exposed to, minority populations very much. So you get exposed to all different types of people from everywhere. Right. And so that was a learning experience in some ways, different backgrounds, different places, different, dialects from all over the country, people from the South, people from all over. So, it was, but that was cool to me. I didn't mind. I like meeting people and talking to people and stuff. So for me, that was interesting. But we had one kid we had the 8-man rooms at basic training, and, this kid from like New Hampshire or something like that. He was a fucking idiot. He was as dumb as a box of rocks. Right. And I'm like, dude,
tell us how you really feel.
Oh, this guy, I don't even know his name. I can't remember his name, but he was an absolute idiot. And so he couldn't make his bed, couldn't fucking polish his boots. Uniform was always fucked up, just total ragbag all the time. Well, we come to find out this guy grew up, never, didn't have running water when he grew up. Right. So he didn't even know how to take a shower. He stunk. First of all, we're like, this motherfucker smells, right? So we told the drill sergeant, we're like, this guy, he's stinky kid, right? So we got to do something about it. The drill sergeant's like, all right, motherfuckers, teach that motherfucker how to take a shower. We're like, what? He's like, yeah, take his ass in there, fucking give him a bar of soap, tell him how to, teach him how to scrub his ass, all that stuff that, drill sergeant voice, right? And so we did. And, after that, he was kind of like, dude in Full Metal Jacket, right? He was kind of like fucking like just not all there, but he didn't like go crazy or anything like that. But so we had to teach him all a little bit, and we came together as a room and got him squared away. But those were some of those things where you're like, what the hell, man? And then then I think we had some dude in another platoon like jumped out of the second floor window, and just. You're like, what the fuck is going on, man? This is crazy. But, ultimately those are experiences that, from the military you get where you broaden your perspective on stuff. Right. So it was all good at the end of the day, but it sucks for the first few weeks, and then you kind of get into the rhythm, and by the end of it, you're like, all right, this isn't bad, So it was, I enjoyed it at the end of the day. Yeah. So it was cool.
So what's 75 Foxtrot AIT like?
Dude.
I mean,
first of all, let me give you the
91, because I don't remember them.
75 Foxtrot was Personnel Information Systems Management Specialist.
Okay.
Right? PISM, right? Okay.
Say that again.
Personnel Information Systems Management Specialist, PISM. Yeah. So it's like this derogatory kind of like at the end of the day, you're like, oh, this I fucking PISM? What the fuck? So it was at Fort Ben Harrison, Indiana. right just north of Indianapolis, or just north of I-70 in Indianapolis. It was the DFAS central, payout headquarters. At one time, that building where DFAS is in Indy was one of the largest buildings in the world under one roof. I found that out while we were there, or something like that. And then the post had been the host of the Pan American Games at some point prior to us getting there. So the barracks were all pretty new and kind of nice. So, you get from basic, you get that intensity from basic, and then you go to AIT. It's a little more relaxed, but you still have drill instructors. And so like I was kind of coming in my own with like, physical fitness. I think when I joined the Army, I probably weighed 165 pounds. And by the time I got through basic and AIT, it was like 180, 185 or something like that. So like, I was gaining muscle, and I was running with the fast group and, stuff like that. I was, but playing sports and things like that, I was fairly athletic, but, not the fastest kid out there or anything like that. But AIT was pretty cool. We got, we'd get passes. And I got a pass one time that I was able to go home, get my car, because it was only 3 hours away, brought my car back to Fort Bend. And then my sister was a freshman at IU that year. And so I actually got to go down and visit her on a weekend or two, and met with some of her girlfriends, which is kind of cool. So
let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But so that wasn't bad. It was a pretty good experience. And I think I finished that like in November of 91, somewhere around there. So
was there any point in that whole process that you're like, why the hell did I go 75 shot? Are you still
I think I figured that out a little bit later. But one thing that was interesting while I was there, this is actually pretty important to my story with the Ohio National Guard, is that I met a couple people there that were in the Ohio National Guard. One of them was this guy named John Huffman. I think Mike might remember him possibly, but anyhow, this guy was an E5. So we had people that were reclassing, probably is why they were in there. He was an E5 and he was doing the course, and he's like, "Hey dude, you gotta think about coming to the Ohio National Guard, because you're not getting this tuition grant thing that we have, right? It pays 60% of your tuition, and you get with the GI Bill on top of that." And I'm like, whoa, why the hell didn't I do that? And so I had that in mind. I go home. I actually report to my unit, which was in Blacklick on Taylor Station Road, and it was part of the 83rd RCOM at that time, which was a reserve command. And it was a I want to say it was like I can't remember what unit it was. Anyway, it was a personal service company. And what was interesting is we had an 04 commander who was actually an infantry officer, which is kind of funny. And my first drill was probably late November of that year. And I show up and I'm like, "Hey sir, I want to transfer to the Ohio National Guard." And he's like, "What the fuck? You just got here. This first drill, like, right?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." He goes, "What the fuck? Fucking give me the fucking thing." And so like literally like within 30 days of my return from AIT, I was going in and swearing into the Ohio National Guard. And so that, kind of drove the story from there. And then so I think 3 or 4 years after I was with the Ohio National Guard, I was kind of like, well, I was doing well, with my NCOs were kind of like, training me and stuff. And I was always involved. I always wanted to do stuff. I would take on the extra duties and things like that. So they were like, well, maybe you can, if you're coming up on 4 years, you can go to PLDC and become an NCO, or you can go to OCS. And so I thought about it for a little bit, and I said, all right, well, I'm going to go to OCS. And back at that time, we had the state program. And then you could also elect to go to the federal program, which was 10 weeks, right? Versus like a year and a half with the Ohio National Guard's OCS program. So I'm like, let's be efficient here. I want to just get my commission and get it done. And I wanted to kind of do it all in one fell swoop. So I decided to stick with the federal program. And so I went to Fort Benning for OCS in 1995. And then I got my commission at the end of like mid-August that year. So, but OCS was awesome. I mean, hard, but really cool.
So like education wise at that point, did you have to have?
Yeah. So back then at that point, you only had to have 2 years of college to be commissioned. And I think, in between my dismissal from Ohio State and, and going to the training and everything, I was taking classes again. So I had built up enough credits to actually get my commission at that point. So, but you had to have your degree by the time you made captain. That was like kind of the deal, right? So, so I had some time, and I think I made captain. Actually, it's funny how the guard timeline was so different than active duty, but I think I got commissioned in late 95, August 95, and then I actually was promoted to captain during my first deployment in 2002. So it took me a little bit, but I also, we also had to kind of rotate through different positions, like PL. I had to be a scout PL, an XO, staff, and then you got to command. So it took a little longer. And I actually I think Mike might agree, that timeline for us, made you better officers because you had more experience. I think a lot of times now you get these kids are, they're literally maybe 26 years old and they're, already making captain, and you're like, fuck, man, you barely had time to be a lieutenant. You know what I mean? So I think some of that foundational stuff was good for us.
Yeah, because I think the timeline, I was active duty, so I think it was 4 years under there to make captain. But you're doing it every day, so I think especially the guard where you're doing it. It's 1 week in a month, what that really ties into. I can see, and especially that time frame when we weren't. You guys weren't mobilizing and going for going on vacation for a year,
right?
And, all these lovely places.
Exactly,
so back to taking classes. What changed in you? I mean, I think I know you probably weren't chasing girls and drinking as much.
I
a little bit. You got your pride stung a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely brought me back down to earth a little bit. Grounded me. Certainly, the discipline you learn in the military helped a lot. I still had some issues with, I went back to Columbus State for a little bit, and then I tried to go back to Ohio State, and I just still wasn't doing what I should be doing at Ohio State. So then I went and took classes at Franklin University, which is where I got my bachelor's. And I finally finished my bachelor's in at the end of 99. I think right after my wife and I got married. So it just, and I was just taking a class here or there. I wasn't pushing it, but I knew that my time was running out as far as trying to make captain. So I kind of had to, get things done. So finally I got my bachelor's in 2000. So it was ultimately the discipline I learned through, basic training, AIT and OCS, and just being in the military, through the guard. And just kind of figuring life out.
Growing up a little bit.
Yeah. You just sort of pull your head out of your ass and you're like, all right, I got to get serious about this stuff. So, and my wife and I started dating right before I went to OCS. So in January of 95, we started dating. And then I was at OCS in June of 95. And so, we had, time together, and we were feeling our relationship out, and I kind of knew she was the one when I was at OCS, and she actually came down there to, Columbus, Georgia, got on a plane from Columbus, Ohio to Columbus, Georgia. I got a taxi cab, got on to Fort Benning, found me at the freaking, party, shelter out by the Chattahoochee River, one of the parks that's right there by the post or whatever. And so I was like, this chick is the shit. You know what I mean? She came all this way and just for 2 days to hang out with me on a pass. And so that was really cool. But yeah, so just growing up kind of got me back on track. Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. It was good. It's fucking
full blown. I just think it's Frank the Tank did it down there. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
That 151 did me in.
Dude, it was I should have been
the flaming doctor.
No,
when you said that, I don't
yeah.
think there'd be. I can't think of how even if want to drink a shot like that right now, I'd be like,
no.
That used to be the bomb back then.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it tasted good. It tasted like Dr. Pepper. It sure did. So I couldn't taste anything anymore. You know what I mean? Oh my God. Yeah. So it was fun.
So obviously that during that time frame, you're part-timing and the guard, working a little bit. What was what was what was that like? Again, I know it's a different lifestyle that I'm accustomed to, but
so I did a lot of retail, I worked, I think I put it in my bio. I worked at Gap I worked for the Gap, but I worked at Gap Kids. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's be real here.
I was a Gap guy too.
Yeah. So, it's funny because then my sister ended up working there too. So we were working together at Gap Kids, which is hilarious, at City Center Mall downtown. Right. So that was fun. We had a good time down there, met some different people, had some crazy experiences with that, but like my manager was gay, just, he was whatever. And then we had a visual arts person who was a female. She was probably bi or whatever, but whatever, it doesn't matter. And so we would go out after work. Sometimes we'd go to these, like we went to the fucking Garage and like the Eagle, which were massive gay bars back then. And, whatever. I just went and had some fun. We were just partying, dancing and stuff. And it was a different experience for me. I had never been around any of that stuff before. Right. So, but again, those are experiences in your life. You're like, okay, exposed to different people and it opens your mind to how other people are. And it was totally great.
My Gap story was just learning how to use that board to fold everything. I was like one of two guys. I did all the stocking, all the work they didn't want to do. I was surrounded by, I was in high school, all women. And then I remember there was they came and got me and they're like, yeah, we have this shoplifter. I need you to come out here. We're going to, confront him. And they started confront him and he just hauled off and zapped this person, the assistant manager, the guy like right in the face and like runs off. Right. So I think at the time I'm making like $4.50 an hour. And they're like, I don't run after the guy. And then like they come back and they're like screaming at me about how I didn't chase the guy down. I'm like, the fuck am I supposed to, what, they're like, you're supposed, I'm like, I'm not supposed to chase anybody down. I'm like, dude, I'm not getting beat down for these acid wash jeans from the Gap.
Right. Totally. Rolex sweaters.
But that damn,
that folding board.
I feel like there's a long part of my life that when I would go shopping, I was really cognizant of that. And I didn't want to like mess things up. Now I feel like I just want to fuck. I just want to like when I'm out there now, like I'm like,
I'm the other way.
No, dude, I used to be bad about now.
Knock the whole stack over and make it
now I'm just like, if I take it out, I'm not like before I was like folding right now. I'm like, you know what? Somebody else can fold that. Go get your little Gap board. Yeah, I don't know what's happened. I mean, my wife will be behind me. I'm just like, does this fit to that? Like I feel really bad. I don't feel bad about it.
Well, I actually like I like take the stack, move it over, get my extra
look at the bottom, double XL,
whatever size I am that day.
I mean, have I ransacked a little bit, maybe, but I mean, I'm not as worried about putting it all back and stuff. I'm like, geez, somebody else.
Yeah,
I mean, well, it is nobody was being nice to me when I had to do it. You know what I mean?
I folded thousands of t-shirts.
That was
and that, that was a good experience. And then I ended up working. So I worked at a ski shop. I'm a skier. I love skiing. I worked at a ski shop out of high school. Ski shack in Columbus is owned by a guy named Al Bloom. He was actually a C-130 pilot. Now that I think about it, just a really good dude, really good. I mean, he was a little bit strict, but he comes from the military, so another exposure to the military. Yeah. Worked there, and then I worked at Gap Kids. I worked at actually one of the limited stores at Northland Mall. I was doing the same thing. I was like stock boy in the back, back of the store. And then I ended up working for Galleon's Trading Company, which is an Indianapolis-based company that sold outdoor gear and fishing, hunting, skiing, outdoor sports, water sports, all that stuff. And it was a really cool place to work because everybody that was there was doing whatever they were selling, kind of thing, camping, all that stuff. So met a lot of really cool people there. Met my best man there, actually, a good friend of mine. But still have lots of friends from that time period. And then really I worked there all the way up until my first deployment, right after 9/11, and things were obviously crazy at that point. My wife and I just bought a house, the year before, I think, maybe not even a full year. And my wife was pregnant with our first daughter, and so I worked retail until I went on my first deployment. And then after the deployment, that's when I started working. It was ADSW, active duty special work back then. Now it's like full-time National Guard duty, or it used to be ADOS or whatever. And that's when I actually met Mike that year, 2003, right when the Iraq War started. Like I think it started right around St. Patrick's Day that year. And we started. Well, he had been working there already, and then he's like, "Hey, dude, you get, this is a good deal." And so I applied and got hired on there, and that's kind of started my active duty time.
So let's go back to
Yeah.
to 9/11. So
Yeah.
you're working,
Yeah.
sports place,
Yep.
you're part-time, like what,
Yeah.
when did you start sensing like this is changing, like
Pretty much like that, like it was crazy.
It's changing for the guard, you know what I mean? Because that was a time frame that it did drastically change.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty immediate. Like I remember, well, first of all, what was crazy is I worked like, we had shifts from like 8 to 5, or like, what was it? Basically we like, it was like till the closing, there was the other shift, right? So I worked the close shift the night before that happened. So I slept in, right? And I totally missed everything that happened live, right? And so my wife had an appointment with her obstetrician. She was going to get checked out or whatever, and it was one that she didn't want me to go to with her or whatever. It wasn't a big deal. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna sleep in. And we had these guys coming over to put in some French doors in the back of our house. We were getting those fixed, and so I wake up and I come out in my living room. These dudes are sitting in front of my television watching the TV. And I'm like, what the fuck are you guys doing? Like, put the fucking door in my, and they're like, man, the fucking towers are gone. I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I look and, this thing's playing out, and I'm like, what the hell? And so, I think, just, I can't really pinpoint, my recognition of what was really happening. But, once you started kind of hearing the news reports of what was going on, and like they were speculating it was terrorism and Osama bin Laden and all this stuff, I was like, oh shit, this is real, And so like within a couple of days, we were getting calls and alerting, hey, we're on alert. We don't know what's happening yet. We'll keep you up to date. And I was a company XO, I think at the time. Yeah, I was Bravo 148's XO, 148 Infantry. And so I had a new commander, this guy named Kevin Lochtefeld, who ended up being our battalion commander later down the road, and just a guy that I kind of grew up from that point on. That was our, like our real first kind of action together was, getting ready to deploy. So we didn't really know what was going on. We got an alert, and then we got called into Beetler Armory, which is the state headquarters for the Ohio National Guard. A lot of the battalion leadership was there, brigade leadership. And we met our battalion commander for the first time because he was coming from a different unit. And so things started happening really quickly. And so my daughter was born the 20th of September that year. So a couple of weeks after everything happened. And so I'm in the hospital, excuse me. And my wife, we just had to be, I got a call saying, hey, we're definitely alerted. We were meeting on, I think it was September 30th or something like that at Beetler. Come in, we'll get a briefing. And I was out the door, I think on 3 October. So a few days after my first daughter was born, and my wife's like, fuck you, I'm going to be here with this newborn and you're going off to who knows where. She didn't really say that, but she was
she probably was though, but just not telling you.
Yeah. So I remember the day that we actually ended up going up to Bowling Green, which is where our unit was. My commander had been at Beetler that day. He was driving an old Chevy Blazer, Cup V, and comes to my house, and I got all my shit, and I'm, loading it in the truck, and my wife comes out with like Panera. She had like gotten us Panera, and she's like, "You want a sandwich?" And handed it off to my commander and me, and and she's like in tears, and Kevin Lochtefeld he always remembered. I was like, yeah, I'm taking your husband away from you, and you're bringing us sandwiches and shit. So it was just like such a bizarre thing going on. But yeah, so we get alerted. We go up to the unit, and they're like, pack everything, your entire MTO, just throw it in the in a container wherever the hell we were going. We didn't even know where we were going. But so we ended up finding out we were going to Fort Knox, and the battalion was getting kind of like spread to the four winds. And ultimately what we did was we were securing MIVAs, basically like the places we ended up at were like Selfridge Air National Guard Base, Camp Ravenna, which was an ammunition plant back in the World War II days. Still had some weird shit over there, so they wanted that secured. Newport Chemical Depot, which is where they stored VX gas they were disposing of, and Rock Island Arsenal, and then Fort Knox. And so we were all over the place. So each company kind of got divvied out the missions, and I was in Bravo. We got Fort Knox, so I was down there as the XO. And then like a few weeks into it, fucking our S1, battalion S1 he was a piece of shit. Sorry if you know who you are, I apologize, but you're a dud, so fuck you. But anyway, so this dude basically was like the XO, you know, we had this XO was brand new to our battalion. He was a taskmaster, literally. Jerry Reese, great dude. He's wild. But anyway, he was very serious about doing work, right? And so they had a staff meeting in the morning one morning, and the one wasn't there. And he's like, "Where's the one?" You know? And he's like, "Well, he's still sleeping." So he's like, "Go fucking wake him up," you know? So dude comes out of his room wearing like his pajamas and rolls into the, you know, the talk, and he fired him on the spot. He's like, "Get the fuck out of here," you know? So then I got called up to be the S1 for the battalion. And so anyway, we're at Fort Knox. We're doing security mission. Our soldiers are out there doing gate security, and, you know, while the units that were there on active duty were kind of figuring out what they were going to do. So we were kind of like backfilling, you know, a lot of the active duty dudes at those places. But then the other places were really, you know, like the one in Newport was pretty serious. Like if, you know, somebody got in there and got VX, you know, it'd be bad, right? So so that was the mission. And so we were there for a full year. We had passes. It was only, you know, for us, it was four hours away from home for me. So every month, I think we got a pass for a couple days. So it wasn't terrible. I could come home occasionally, and then my wife would come down she came down for Christmas with our youngest daughter. She was like, you know, 3 months old or something like that at that point. So, you know, it wasn't horrible. We didn't have to go overseas or anything like that, but it was still, a mission that, you know, took us away from our family for a full year. And
yeah, because I think it was Operation Noble Eagle.
Yeah,
that's
Noble Eagle.
when you guys went and filled out.
They were doing like airport security for some of them and stuff, but we were doing site security for the most part. Yeah. So
was there a party that would have been better off thinking if you just went right over to Afghanistan, Iraq? Were you thinking that at all?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially as infantry guys, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we kind of wanted to go, you know, I guess prove our mettle, for lack of a better description. Yeah. And it was the same later on in a you know, another mission that I ended up going to do. But basically, yeah, I mean, we wanted to go kill the enemy. I mean, everyone was pissed, right? We wanted to go take the fight, but, you know, as the Guard, we were still we hadn't really been proven in combat yet, right? So, and I don't think the DOD or the Army really knew what to do with us other than backfill, you know, active duty units. So, so that kind of evolved obviously throughout the rest of the next couple of decades, but yeah, it was our first
definitely changed. Yeah,
definitely.
Sure. It was crazy to see, like, you know, we had, I think the New Mexico National Guard was with us in 2003 in Afghanistan. And we're like, these guys, what the fuck?
Right.
Like,
I mean,
then, you know, you start to watch like over the time, how many, you know, over the next 20 years, how much,
and
how many deployments. And
what's interesting about the Guard in a lot of ways is, you know, we were doing other things. Like you have a civilian job, you're an accountant. I had a PhD biologist, you know, was one of my platoon sergeants, you know, and you know, you had lots of guys who were carpenters or, you know, or police officers or whatever, right? So they got a wide variety of civilian experience. And I think when you bring that diversity of, you know, problem solving, I guess, to the fight, Guardsmen are usually pretty resourceful when it comes to figuring stuff out. And they may have a skill set that an active duty soldier just has never developed, right? So there's some intangibles that kind of come along with Guard deployments that evolved, you know, once we learned our field craft a little bit better and became better with, you know, tactics and weapons and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, better equipment.
Yeah, right. We got real equipment. Yeah, not the freaking prick 77s that we use. Like,
M16A2
I see you over there. I can't talk to you on the radio. What?
Oh, I just remember those guys had like them. They had like the M16A2, and and all these. You see soldiers like, God, can you imagine you have to lug that goddamn thing around? You're like, yeah, I used to have to, like you don't want to tell them, but it's like it just looks so funny. You're like, God, those poor guys.
It's horrible.
Yeah, it was. So let's talk about personal stuff at that time. So you kind of blew through it fast, but you had a baby.
Yeah,
your wife had a baby.
Yes,
you leave within a couple weeks.
Yeah,
you're still 4 hours away. What was that like? Honestly,
it was it was hard because I knew what she was going through with a newborn, and fortunately we had a really good support network. My mom was still alive and nearby, a couple minutes away, and my sister was home, and her mom was around, her parents were around. So, we had a great support network, but I wasn't there, missing all these things, and so, we were in communication, had cell phones, and we could talk, and I had, email and all that stuff. So, we were able to communicate, but it's just not the same when you're not there. So it was tough in that way. I always look forward to, making that trip home, and drove as fast as I could, up 71 and stuff or 70, I don't even know, 75 or whatever through. Anyway, but just coming home every once in a while. So it made it more bearable, but it was still a year away from home, and so that was, and it was tough too, because then you come home and you're home for 3 or 4 days and you got to go back. It's like, I don't want to fucking leave again. I might just, some more time with the kid. And, and so my daughter was, again, she was growing and everything was happening, all this stuff that you just don't get to see. So that was tough. I mean, that's always the toughest part when you leave home. It's leaving your family behind is really the hardest thing. I mean, because, when you're deployed, you've got, depending on what kind of unit you're in, you have 130 to 150 dudes that are like-minded, and you kind of, rely on each other. But when you're away from family, it's the worst part, so she's always been super, resilient and tough and, independent and strong, and all those, superlatives that she has as far as characteristics. And she's just a tough, tough cookie for doing that. And she did a great job, while I was away. But that's the hardest part.
See, I had a lot of guilt for a long time. Because I actually volunteered to go to Korea so I could go to Bragg after. And I found out after I'd volunteered that my wife was pregnant with our first son. And then, so I was over and, I left with her pregnant and came home for, I think, 21 or 22 days for mid-tour leave. And I left her for another 6 months, or actually it was longer than that, because I think I came early. I think
so. That was Korea.
Korea. So it was like 99, 2000. So there's no, you could talk and stuff. But that was the first time for me when I look back at it now. I mean, a lot of guilt. A lot, because, I did, when I think about it, I didn't talk about it, right? Because a lot of it was just, when I was over there, hanging out with guys and drinking.
Right.
And, it was the first time I started, the unhealthy thing of detaching. So that's what I would do is when I would, when I would go somewhere, I just detach from it, and that didn't work out, for me very well. So but there's a ton of guilt because, I'm really doing what I want to do. Like when I would sit back and think about it, I was like, well, fuck it. She knew that, what I was doing, and she knows I wanted to go here. And but over time there was that guilt of like, when you come back to things you missed, and then you see him. And I don't, for me, it's interesting because I left, my middle son, I think when he was 3 months old. But I definitely see a difference in my two oldest, who they gravitate to some stuff, and that stuff matters. So there's a long time for me that was like, hey, my wife did not get out of the park. There was, I'm sure there's a lot, she has some resentment with it, but that's fine. But there was always that guilt. And for me, I just was like, 99 was great because, you didn't have phones and all that kind of stuff. So I could just detach and, and, it wasn't good for me. The phone, you could get on the phone and do some stuff, but it was just very there's no getting on camera, there's not, I think there's I think it was like AOL or something.
Yeah. It might've had some, but even then it was like, you still had to do the dial up, and so if you were on a chat or whatever, and somebody called, it would dial in and break your connection.
Because to me it was like it was tearing me up though. There was a lot of guilt, and when the second time it happened to me, that's when it kind of tipped for me, at least, because I was
Yeah.
I had a lot of, shame and guilt about leaving my wife and kids and just, and dude, I miss them, but I just couldn't say it. And, so, I just, came up with this bullshit thing that I didn't miss them. And it didn't really work out for me. But it's rough for everyone.
Tough. I mean, I think, you do like day to day, you're consumed with what you're doing. And you have all those problems you're trying to resolve one way or the other, whatever it is that you're doing. So you have to focus on that. But at the same time, it's tough to not be home and watching all these other things going on. But, you realize that's your job. But you're right. It still leaves a level of guilt, that you missed, almost a full year of your, your family.
Yeah, for me, it was more, 100%. Yeah. I just wish I'd had the courage then to to say how much I miss my family. And, like when people talked about, I can't, I think about it sometimes, how many times if somebody came to me and was telling me they're missing their kid and wife, I would do the stupid, officer thing and,
suck it up,
degrade them and, call them, whatever name. And and meanwhile, I felt the same way, it was something you just couldn't do. And I think that's what jives down to, that for a long time, just sitting, not having the courage to say that, and like just even like having conversation with my wife, we had a conversation one time and about it and, basically told her that I'd rather, go to Afghanistan than be home.
Yeah.
It seemed like a smart thing to say at the time. I don't recommend ever saying that.
I think I think at one point, man,
it was total bullshit, but it was
later on, like for me, it was things like my mom. So this is a little bit later, flash forward a little bit. I apologize for kind of skipping over, but we'll go back. But just kind of reminded me that, when my mom had breast cancer and she ultimately, she ended up passing away in 2011. And I was supposed to go to Afghanistan with our brigade and our battalion. I was the XO of the battalion at the time, but I ended up having cervical fusion. I had 3 vertebrae fused that year. I was having issues with my, my hands, and I was having back pain and stuff. So when I got checked out and they found this, so I ended up having surgery, and I was on the rear deck. Me and Mike both were back. And but before that happened, I've been preparing my family, what I thought was the right thing to do. And by saying things like to my mom, I go, if something happens to you, I don't know that I'm going to be able to come home. Like, what the fuck, dude? Like that's a horrible thing to say to your mother who's sick with cancer. Right? Yeah. And so like those kind of moments where you're like, but you also have to like, you're going to go, you have to kind of like build those barriers to an extent so you can deal with it and cope with the fact that you're away from, like when your mom is facing mortality, literally. And I'm getting a little bit emotional thinking about it, but it's just what was I thinking when I said that, but I was also trying to kind of like wall it off myself so that I wouldn't get distracted by what was going on. So, are those the right things to do? Probably not, in hindsight, but that's how you compartmentalize things in your mind to deal with what you're getting ready to go do. And so, cause we were going to go into, more of a combat environment at that point for that mission. And so, it was a much more serious mission than the other, deployments that I had at that point. So it was just tough. And so I can relate, to that. That's tough to do, and kind of, isolate yourself that way.
Yeah, you can't go back in time. No one can, but it is interesting. Like if anyone in that situation, if you're going wherever, just be honest about how you're feeling, talk about it, get the emotions out there, listen to, listen to what your spouse is saying about it. If they're angry with you, they're crying with you, just get it out. Cause for me, it was, I internalized a lot. I didn't let her have a chance to speak about it. And, I put a lot of my own thoughts to it for many years, and I'm sure I was way worse on myself than what she was. She seems pretty. She's
still with you,
way more.
So it must not have been.
She did pretty good. I mean, like you were talking about coming back for a few days. I feel like coming back. Whenever I come back, all I was there was like try to flex that I'm the husband or dad. Let me try to do something.
Yeah, I know.
Always inevitably fuck something up because you're like in their domain, right? You're like,
listen, I've been doing this for a year. Just fuck off.
Like your job is just to hang that picture. You don't tell me where it goes.
Yeah.
It's my house. Is it like okay?
No, it's not.
Where would you like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was a different.
I can relate to
It was
that
a
for
different.
sure.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I recommend always, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
talking about how you feel with anybody,
Yeah,
not
no
just
doubt
in
about it.
situations like
Yeah,
that. But
for sure.
get out, listen to the other person, and
Yeah.
it probably is not going to be as bad as what you think in your mind.
No, it's just,
Yep.
you got to be honest with yourself and what's happening. And it's okay to be, to have emotion, what I mean? It's not like we're so ingrained in our manhood that we have to like put on these faces and stuff. But truthfully, we have emotions too. We think about things, things make us unhappy or sad or happy or whatever it is. But, if you don't acknowledge that in your own self, you're just causing your own problems. Right. So definitely, talk about it, communicate it, because that's the best thing to do. Yeah.
I always have been good at that.
I know it's tough. It's tough.
Now sometimes
Now you're like
I'm looking at Joe and
now
I look at Joe over there and I'm always like, now I over communicate. I'm like, I need to talk to Joe.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah. Dude.
I'm feeling this way, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. Give me a hug, please.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. I need a hug. Yeah. Sometimes I need a hug. Yeah.
Good. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. I'm a big hugger now. I love hugging.
For sure.
Even Joe likes hugging now. He's a big hugger.
Yeah. It's good.
That's always weird when guys like that's what it's a Saber Warrior thing, right? We hug a lot.
Yeah.
And it's funny how it throws people off, man. It's the
Hugging?
weirdest. Yeah, like guys hugging. People are like, I love it now when they see people. They look at you like you're strange.
I don't think I ever like greet like friends, especially like without a good hug. You know what I mean? It's because honestly, like, why not? Number one. Number two, it feels good. Number three, like, what if something happens? You didn't get that hugging, like,
And there's a hugging, like there's a Joe's laughing. And everybody down your nose pretty much is like the saw hug, right? You go heart to heart. So like this year, I'm not being as dominant about that. Like if I was to hug you, I'd have to like we got to hug this way. Like 2025, I'm like, if somebody wants to hug me, I'll hug them. But like for like 2024, I was like, no, you got to hug this way. And like people are like, what's with this? Why do you hug that way? And I'm like, heart to heart. And it's like, it even creeps them out even more.
I see what you're saying.
But I'm okay. I like it though. I like it.
Yeah, it's
I like
good.
It, heart to heart. Now I'm like, if you just want to hug, we're gonna hug. I know Joe hugged you guys.
So that would be like left.
He didn't go he didn't hug you guys the right way. He was like gave you like the bro.
The opposite side. Yeah.
I was watching.
I kind of like that.
You didn't see us behind the big screen, but we were over there. Him and I were over there.
Just holding each other. Yeah, it's good. There's nothing wrong with that.
I feel like hugging Joe right now.
I have a good, one of my good OCS buddies. He's
and Josh, I like hugging him with his new Patagonia.
Yeah,
I've
got a good OCS buddy. He's one of my favorite people on the planet. His name's David Kolniszewski, and he's from Buffalo. He was from Buffalo originally. Now lives in Athens, Georgia. He has 3 girls, so we both were blessed with the female offspring. And we're both like, he's 6'4", like he was in his prime. He was like 6'4", like 220, just ripped, and just a big, massive human being, like just anyway, great dude. And he is the biggest hugger I've ever met in my life. And it's so great to get a David hug, like this guy, when he fucking pulls you in, you're like, this is where I want to be.
Yeah, I mean, all joking aside, like you just said it, like I'm making a lot of jokes about it.
No, it's
only because I want to, but there's something to be said about it. It's one of the things, like I've always with my boys, I've always been a hugger with my boy, with my boys growing up, but like it's really like a weird thing. Like, I was up at it's funny, I was up at just this year up at the Cleveland Yankees series.
Yeah,
and we were leaving, and my oldest son had a couple of his college friends with him, and they were like departing, and I'm just hugging them goodbye, and we were wearing Yankee garb, so the guy did say something. I'm not going to say exactly what he calls, but yeah, they were like these guys said something derogatory about us hugging. But, but there is something. There's nothing wrong with that. No. I mean, his guys were told that you can't do that. But dude, there's some. It's a powerful thing. I mean, I mean, you're right. And everybody needs a hug sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, doesn't matter. I'll hug anybody anytime. Let's go.
Too. We're gonna find out after the podcast. All right, Joe. We're gonna find out. We're gonna have to teach him heart to heart.
Just hold it for a minute. Stay in it.
We're gonna teach you the saw hug afterwards.
All right, I like.
We'll see how you do after that. Are you ready to do it? Are you still sipping on that? I'm not drinking. I'm still in there. You wanna? We went a little while, but you wanna try a different
one? Sure. Yeah. Let me throw this.
I'm not drinking, so I don't know what day I'm in. This is a really bad idea. just like I did last year. But this year I made it even longer.
It's
So
Thursday.
yeah, it's always
Thursday.
fun. So
Yeah.
we're doing another Heaven Hill product. Right,
Okay.
a good friend of mine was with another company. He's now with Heaven Hill. So
Okay.
I promised him we'd hit hard with
Yeah.
Heaven Hill. We
Okay.
just did Heaven Hill 2 weeks ago, but
Yeah.
another one of my favorite Heaven Hill products. We've talked about Heaven Hill in the past. They're located in Bardstown, Kentucky. It was founded in 1935. It's actually the only private American family-owned and operated distillery in Kentucky.
Interesting.
It's the 7th largest alcohol supplier in the U.S. And it right now I think has the second largest holder of bourbon whiskey inventory in the world.
Wow.
So
that's pretty amazing.
It's pretty big. Yeah. Have you been down there before?
No, that's definitely a bucket list. I've got to do the bourbon trail. I literally, I think my wife got me one of those for Christmas one year, and we just somehow didn't do it. And I think I'm close to retiring again soon. So, it's going to have to be done soon.
Yeah, Heaven Hill's a great one, and there's tons of brands have come from Heaven Hill. Heaven Hill themselves, Evan Williams, Elijah Craig, Old Fitzgerald,
all right,
Larceny, Henry McKenna, and Rittenhouse. So the Rittenhouse Rye is interesting from the Pennsylvania stuff reference you talked to, but Rittenhouse is produced in the traditional classic Pennsylvania or Monongahela rye.
Yep.
Look at that. I didn't know you knew that. Yeah, look at that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Monongahela.
I could research that a little more.
I believe, or something.
Yeah. So these ryes are actually like there was 2 different ryes that were going on at that time frame when Rittenhouse first came out, and they said that the Pennsylvania ryes are considered to be more spicy and fruitier. Okay. And this style, like when back in the day, had about 80 to 100% rye, which is a lot of rye. And if you're into whiskey, right, like there's some very predominant mash bills at 95% rye, 5% malt barley. But what's funny about this is even though this is very low rye mash bill, which is more traditional of the Kentucky rye mash bills. This brand started in 1934, was passed around by a bunch of different companies. But it was relaunched in 1993 by Heaven Hill. And then it's been, this has been distilled in a bunch of different places, but it's been distilled in Heaven Hill since 1993, with the exception of 1996 when they had the big fire in Heaven Hill. And it moved the production down to Brown and Foreman for a couple years, but it's back there. But this is a private barrel pick from OPA. This is second rise of charm. It's 100 proof. That's non-age stated. And even though, we talked about the Pennsylvania mash bill, this is actually not even close to what those were. This is 51% rye, 30% corn, and 12% malted barley. So these are always fantastic.
A good ones. Yep. I might have to get a different, I got a little left in this guy. So
Josh, it's one of the guys that grab you one.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I appreciate that. A little bit of
help yourself.
A little bit of a look here. I have Irish in me.
There you go.
And my wife's her main name's Finn. So
Joe almost snuck in there and gave you a hug too.
I would not have resisted. It's all good. Let me give it just a little small pour. It's probably good enough for girls we date.
Did you guys want to try this or no?
Oh, that smells good.
You could pass it to him there. Just pass the bottle there.
Let me get a little.
Yeah, so you got to, we could probably talk for 3 hours about your career, but you did eventually deploy over to Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess first, what happened with your career? You went in 06, went AGR.
Yeah.
So active guard reserve.
So just real quick, I back up to just a couple steps.
Yeah.
Right before I deployed to Kosovo in 04-05. Actually, Mike was there with us as well. We were basically Mike and I. Mike Draper, who has been on your show before, he and I, our career paths were parallel. He was a field artillery. I was in infantry, but after we started working together in 03, we were best buds, fast friends. We'd sit down in our jock is what we did. We worked in the Joint Operations Center at the state headquarters, and I was doing I was pulling intel briefs and shit and casualty updates and stuff. And if we had deployed units, I was trying to go out on the SIPR side, the high side, and finding information about our units or whatever. And Mike was the chief. He was one of the ops guys, and we were we just worked together. But we would just laugh all day long. It was fucking awesome. So in 04, we got alerted that we were going to go and do this K4 mission. K46 Alpha, and it was from I think we ended up getting in theater in August of 04, and it was a 6-month rotation. So we got out in March of 05. And so, again, I deployed, I was gone. This one was a little bit more, a little more real because it was an overseas deployment. And now my youngest daughter was 2.5, something like that. Just real quick, great deployment. It was a great stepping stone for Iraq because it was like we were doing patrolling and, vehicle movements. I was the HAC commander, but I was on the staff as the S3 plan. So I was writing op orders and frag orders and working. I was doing a lot of stuff with the Serbian military. We'd do these things called bilaterals. We'd go over and, sit down and talk with them at their FOB, and they'd come over to our place or a neutral site, and we'd do stuff. And so it was really cool deployment. Got to do some really cool things. Got to work with the French, the Germans, the Pol-Ukers, the Finn-Irish, all these different international militaries. It was really cool. Gendarmerie from France and the Carabinieri from Italy and everything. It was just, there was Russians, and it was crazy. It was really cool. So that was a really good formative deployment for me. I learned how to do, more traditional, staff planning and execution and coalition work and all that stuff. So it was really cool. So then flash forward a little bit, 2005, also the year Hurricane Katrina hit, right? So my youngest daughter, who's a freshman in college now, Sophia, and again, I'm going to back up really quickly back to Kosovo. She's named Sophia after Sofia, Bulgaria, where I had a couple days with my wife while we were in FMPP. We called it what was that FMPP, Mike? You remember what it was called?
No, I didn't get
it was basically like a pass. So we got to go over to Sofia, Bulgaria. My wife flew over with my mother-in-law and my youngest daughter, and we got to spend some time together. And Sophia was, brought into the world at that point, essentially. So flash forward again a little bit now to Katrina. So my youngest was born the 29th of August, 2005, which is the day it made landfall. So, we're literally in the hospital again. We get a call from my first sergeant, who's my readiness NCO or my readiness NCO at the, I was now a commander of Bravo 148. And, he's like, yep, we're getting alerted. We got to meet at the armory on, like the 1st of September, bring all your shit, like 2 or 3 days after my daughter's born. Right. So like my wife is still like limping around the house. And again, I'm off to who knows. Right. So that was a 3-week rotation down there. We, started off in Mississippi, ended up in New Orleans doing, search and kind of, trying to find people and doing points of distribution and all that kind of stuff. And crazy experience. So, so my daughter's, basically 3 weeks old when I get home from that. And then simultaneously, we're in the rotation window now for the OIF missions. And my unit, Bravo 148, was selected to be deployed in 06. So we had about a year to kind of prep for that. And so that kind of leads up to that deployment ultimately. So, and again, now my youngest is barely a year old, and I'm leaving this was a much longer deployment. This is when we were 12 months boots on the ground. So our whole window was, I think I left home in May of 06 and got back in September of 07. So about 16 months of time away with a, mid-tour 2-week leave. So, but yeah, I kind of forgot the question.
Was that your toughest time?
Yeah.
Was that your toughest time being away?
Yeah. It was.
We're talking about AGR, but that's okay.
Yeah.
No
So,
big deal.
but I got hired.
Yeah.
So I got hired AGR literally 2 weeks before I deployed. So
yeah.
I had applied and was hired AGR back in 03. This is where it gets a little crazy, but the standards for medical fitness back then was like a chapter 2 physical. So you had to kind of go through like a full MEPS physical to become an AGR, right? So I get all the way through and I'm sitting down with the surgeon at the end. He's reviewing my packet and he's like, "You're disqualified." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, you had asthma when you were a kid." And I'm like, like I kind of explained, I'm like, "Yeah, I had it until I was 12 and I, grew out of it and I, I've got a waiver to get in." So I went to basic training. I went to AIT. I went to OCS. I went to OBC. I got deployed twice. And now or once at that point. Now you're telling me I can't be an AGR? Like, what the fuck are you talking about? So
that's the military, baby.
Yeah, right. So that's when I got hired at ADSW and worked with Mike down because I could still go do that, but I couldn't be on AGR status, right? So they moved on to one of my good friends. Joe Adams was selected to be the job. I was going to be a training officer at Infantry Battalion, basically the assistant S3. And so kind of got skipped over for that. So now flash forward, they changed the standard to a Chapter 4 physical in 2004, like a year after I got disqualified. So then I reapplied for a job in 2006, and I got hired May 1st when we deployed the 15th or something like that. So cool enough, the brigade, full-time brigade administrative officer, Rick Curry, was great enough to let me be hired and then deploy like 2 weeks later. So they had to hold my spot basically vacant for a year. So that's when I started my AGR career, but it was right before deployment. So I go to Mob Station, and then, we did a 2-week or a 30-day leader seminar. So we had all of our E6s and above. Went to Fort Dix again. It was like all this shit that I'd gone through always ends up leading back to Fort Dix for some reason. So we go there and train up for a few, I think 3 months. And then went over to Kuwait for like in September. I think actually we flew out of country on September 11th. Actually flew from the United States on September 11th, and got to theater, did a 2-week thing in Kuwait, and then went north. That mission was supposed to be convoy security. And I think partway through our training at Fort Dix, they remissioned us to do detainee operations. So, which is typically an MP mission. There were 31 echoes, which were basically, you only found 31 echoes at like Fort Leavenworth, guys that were like, they called them cage kickers, right? Like guards, prison guards. And so we got tasked to do that mission. So my infantry guys, I had 150 guys on this deployment that we're going to take forward, which is about almost a platoon more than a normal infantry company. So it was an oversized unit. It was designed around a DMD, deployment manning document, for this convoy security mission, but then it evolved into this detainee mission. So we get assigned to an MP battalion headquarters with an OD maintenance company and some other, combat support type unit and then the MP company. And we formed this, the unit over there to do detainee operations and basically provide care, custody, and control for about 4,000 detainees at Camp Cropper in Baghdad. And at that time, this was like beginning of the surge. And between Cropper and Camp, it was on the top of my head here a second ago, but between our facility and the other facility, there was about 20,000 detainees in theater. So Camp Buka, which was in Kuwait, and between those two, 20,000 or so detainees, and they would kind of rotate them back and forth. So if they were at Cropper for too long, they would throw them on a plane, send them south, and we'd get rotators up from Buka as well, because it was done purposely to kind of, like interdict their ability to, collaborate and, come up with plans and stuff, and to radicalize each other even further than they already were. So needless to say, my guys were not happy about that mission. Because again, we wanted to go over and, prove our mettle as infantrymen instead of fucking babysitting a bunch of detainees. Right. So we were pissed. So that was a tough leadership challenge for me as a commander, to get my guys like focused on doing this mission. I was like, look, we can moan and cry and bitch about it for a year, or we can fucking suck it up and just realize that we're not going to do the mission we were sent to do originally, and just, and our job is to take care of each other. That's all I care about, is that you guys are good and we get home safe. And, my job is to make sure you're all brought home safe. And so it was a tough sell at first. But once we got into it, we had a really good, core of NCOs, platoon sergeants that were great. I had, some of the best NCOs I've ever worked with. Guys like Craig Murray, Mike knows this guy. He's just phenomenal. Dan McCruskey, Jeff Rick, who was one of my friends who was KAA later on in Afghanistan. Just great dudes all around. And so we made it work. Had this female battalion commander, a West Pointer. She ended up being I think she's a 2-star at the end of her career, but she and I did not see eye to eye. She did not like the infantry. She thought we were all a bunch of freaking, cowboys and whatever. And so originally we get there and we had there was like 4 compounds, right? And each compound probably housed close to 1,000 detainees in each compound. Like we said, about 4,000 total. And we had like 200 soldiers at any given time on duty. So it was, we were way outnumbered. They would do everything they could to fuck with us all the time. But originally we had like each platoon had, we had a compound 2 was our compound. And that was like all the Al-Qaeda guys and the radicalized Sunnis. And then we had another compound that was all the radicalized Shia. So the Takfiris and the Wahhabists and all that stuff. And so we had kind of the hardcore Sunni Al-Qaeda guys. And then separately, there was another compound that was a little more controlled. And that was where some of the Saddam's deck of cards guys were being housed. They were like right next door to us. And that was more of a secret mission. It had some more 3-letter agencies running around doing stuff over there. But then we had a fusion cell where they would interrogate some of these dudes and all this stuff. But we had the Al-Qaeda guys at first as a platoon. Like they would rotate in our platoons, right? 3 shifts or 2 shifts a day, 12-hour shifts. Our guys we relieved another infantry unit. So we got trained by the other infantry unit. And so our tactics for dealing with these guys were pretty aggressive because we were falling in on what the guys before us were doing, right? And so this is post Abu Ghraib, so everything's under a microscope, and like even we had round counts. Every less than lethal munition we used was counted and all this stuff. And so we were like kind of ramping up the usage numbers at first. And so the battalion commander, decided that she didn't want that, and so they just like fucking scatterplotted us all over the place. So now I didn't have any platoon integrity, company integrity. All my leaders were all over the place. I had all my platoon leaders were farmed out to be staff guys. Like one of my platoon leaders was the S2. One of them was the S5. The other was in charge of the Iraqi corrections officers. And then my XO, one of them was the 4 and the other one was my XO was the ICO guy, Iraqi corrections officers. So like I really was kind of on my own. Me and my first sergeant were just managing the rotations and the shifts and stuff. But then we would get pulled into shift work. So I was what we called a TIF duty officer, which Theater Internment Facility is TIF. And then so you're like staff duty, but you're making sure that everything's being done properly within the code of conduct and all the stuff that they wanted us to do. And that was kind of every day. I'd get a 12-hour shift, and I'd do that every couple of days. I'd get a shift, and then otherwise I was in my CP, trying to figure out where all my people were. So we had like 152 guys, 2 shifts in like 20 different sites on this compound. And so when we had incoming or any kind of like, big voice stuff, we had to get accountability. It was really hard to do, but we cracked the code and kind of figured all that out. We had a really good group of guys that were able to get that stuff figured out. But it was a really, really long year. I was in the battalion commander's office probably once a day for something stupid, dude like rolling his hat or cuffing his sleeves or wearing his glasses on his hat or something, that granted they're not meeting the standard as far as uniform and appearance and stuff like that. But like, at a certain point, you're like, this is just stupid little piddly shit. And I know little things can become big things, but honestly, it was like, this is just ridiculous. So it was just shit like that every day. It was just really, really annoying. And then these guys, the detainees would riot, on every holiday. They knew our holidays. They knew what day it was. They knew when to fuck with us. They would throw piss and shit at you all the time. And, they would, when they would riot, they would start burning stuff and they had these like, sort of like, we call it when they were water closets, right? That's what they call them, WCs. And the WCs were cinder block. It's genius. So they would break the cinder blocks off and toss them at you and hurl them at you and stuff. And we'd just get into these like, these confrontations with these guys all the time. And so that was, that stress and worrying about escapees and worrying about detainee abuse and all that stuff was pretty tough. Just dealing with that. I mean, it wasn't, again, it wasn't direct combat. We weren't like, but I can tell you, my guys would probably say that every day they were battling with these guys, and they would test you, they would fuck with you, they would try to fight you. We had these like little isolation cells. Basically, if a guy would act up in the compound, we'd put him in a segregation cell. It was a sweat box, basically, right? It was out in the sun. It wasn't in the sun necessarily, but it was a cage separated from all the other detainees in an area that we could watch them, observe them, and we put them in there according to the Geneva Convention and the rules that were, that bound all that stuff within the rules. We would do that stuff. And so we had guys that they would be in these seg cells, and then they would, try to fight our guys when they'd come out, and so they would grab a guy in there and, try to take him down or whatever. And we didn't have our weapons, because you couldn't carry your weapon around and then, put yourself at risk if they got a hold of it. So just shit like that. It was just miserable. It was a miserable year. Didn't lose anybody, fortunately. But again, the worst part is again, being away from family, but just dealing with the day-to-day bullshit it was a lot.
And it's not the only story I've heard with the National Guard where you have a mission and then you go somewhere else and it's totally different. It's always interesting to hear that.
It
sucked. You train for one thing and then you get trained on another thing and then you do another
literally
thing.
Out of the 90 days we were at Fort Dix, we trained, I think 7 days on detainee operations. So it was like,
what could go wrong?
Yeah. Right. No big deal. Fucking stupid.
So we're cruising along.
Yeah.
You talked about, you've been part of the Guard now. You retired just over 30 years. I think it was 21 active, you said?
Yeah, 21.
And 9. Conventional reserves, I guess you call it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. I mean, it was, concurrent, right? But the majority of my time up to the year 2000, 2001 was M-Day. We call it M-Day.
Because one of the things you mentioned is doing casual assistance. And I mean, can you talk a little bit about, what that, for people that don't know, casualty assistance is, could be that funeral stuff. It could be bringing body, transporting bodies.
So the way it works with the Guard is the casualty assistance centers at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And for, when they repatriate remains to the United States, first of all, you would get a notification mission, and we would be on call. We had 5 major subordinate commands, basically brigade size headquarters in the state. And so each month we rotate, or quarter, I can't remember. Was it quarter, Mike? Monthly. So we would rotate who was on call, and you would have trained CAOs and CNOs within the brigade. Usually officers and senior NCOs. We had chaplains and things like that. So as an officer, you would be one of those designees. And so you get a call from the CAC, would come into our administrative officer from the state headquarters, usually, as we had a casualty assistance office in the state that would be tied into the CAC at Fort Knox. So they would call us and say, all right, we got a notification or an assistance or both. We need a CNO and a CAO. And the first time I ever did it was in 2011. And it was for a female soldier, female officer, who was originally a guardsman in Ohio. She went to Kent State, and she went through RTC there, commissioned. She was in one of our medical companies, I think, before. Maybe she was an MP. She was an MP, and then ended up branching Medical Service Corps. And she ended up marrying an active duty soldier from at Fort Bragg. He was a field artillery officer. So she's down there in her guard role with the North Carolina National Guard. And they had this posting for CSTs. And I don't know if you know what CSTs are, right? So Special Operations Forces, CSTs were attached to units that go in, post kinetic operations to kind of, not interrogate, but get information from the female population in those compounds, because they're effectively off limits to male soldiers, right? So they came up with the idea, put these CSTs in there, go get that information and provide useful information for future operations. So she was assigned to 2nd Battalion, 75th Rangers, and they had done a raid. They thought the compound was secured. So they called them in to go do their thing. And they were on their way into the compound, and there was 3 soldiers, a guy named Christopher Domey, Christopher, I want to say his last name is Horn, and Ashley White. Ashley was the CST, obviously, and so she was kind of following those guys in, and one of them stepped on a pressure plate. It was daisy chained. She was wounded severely, did not pass immediately. They medevaced her, and she was actually, from what I heard, post my CEO duties from the family and stuff, she was still alive, and talking with the medics for a little bit. And then I think she had massive injuries to her femur or her pelvis, and so some of the blood vessels in there, and eventually she passed from those injuries. And just she was like one of these, she was super tough female, right? You kind of have to be to get into that program in the first place. But she was like literally the true quiet professional from the female side. She was very understated, but if you told her to do a bunch of pull-ups, she'd knock them out and make the boys like kind of weak. And all the Rangers that ended up coming to the services and stuff. General Mulholland came up, the USASOC commander, he was there. The regimental commander from the 75th Ranger Regiment was there. They all held her in high regard, right? So that was my first mission as a CAO. And like you go in after the CNO, who was a good friend of ours, Mike Bell, went up there as a captain. He went up and did the notification, and I followed on as the assistance officer. And the assistance officer is there to kind of, guide the family through the process after somebody's been killed in action or killed, in any regard. But generally, it's usually KA. So, my job was to kind of get them the right resources, point them in the right direction, help them with the funeral arrangements and all that kind of stuff. And because it was very high profile, the Rangers sent up an NCO, an E7, and I forget his name at the moment, but great guy. He came up to help me. They sent their chaplain up there. He helped a lot. So we, together, I was up there for probably a good week and a half. I was there for a few days before they went to Dover to see the dignified transfer, the family. I did not go to Dover because I was the CAO for the mother and the father. Because she was married, the parents went, and then the husband had a CAO, and so they went to see the transfer. And so I stayed at home for that. I went back home for a couple of days, and I came back up when they got back, and then we got everything pulled together, and it was a extremely amazing ceremony. They had like a case on and all this, like it was a procession from the church, and it just went off really, really well. They did the final roll call. The Rangers did, with the sergeant major at the high school when they kind of did the ceremony, and General Mulholland was there, and that dude is a massive human being. If you've never, like, he's huge, like big old bear paw, like swallowed my hand. He coined me, which was really cool. But it was super emotional. One of the greatest honors that I think anybody could do as a soldier is to do that process. And so that was really, eye-opening for me. It was very rewarding, sad. But to this day, I'm still in touch with that family. That was, 14 years ago now. I just actually went up they're up in Northeast Ohio, up near Alliance, and went to their Memorial Day parade and was a guest speaker there for the ceremony at the cemetery in town. And so, and I still, like, I send them flowers every year on the anniversary and stuff. And so, it's when they train you, they're like, don't make a relationship with the family. But, like, again, if you have a freaking heart beating in your chest, how do you not, like, connect with a family that's just lost, had the worst day of their life. Right. So, really, really tough. I mean, I was terrified to go knock on that door, man. I remember driving up there. It was like getting late, we have a certain window of time you have to do it within, like, I think total of, you have to get the notification done within like 4 hours of getting the call. And then the CAO comes in after that. So say 5-6 hours or something. And it was like late at night. I remember I drove up in my civilian clothes. I found a church and I, like, changed into my greens, right? Army greens at that point, and knocked on the door, and, like, they invited me in. I was like, they were all sitting in the front room of their house, and Mrs. White, Mama White, she's awesome. She came in and opened the door, and like, the first words out of my mouth were like, "How are you doing?" Duh, dumb fucking question, idiot. But, like, what do you say? Like, how do you even begin to kind of make conversation to get in the door? It was really, so I felt like an idiot, but they were super nice and brought me into the kitchen, and we talked, and I said, there's going to be a lot of stuff coming at you, and it's going to be pretty crazy, but if you need anything, that's what I'm here for, and I'll help you. And, tomorrow you're going to go to Dover, and we'll get that all squared away and everything. And they were great. And like I said, they're still, I feel kind of like part of their family in a small way, but they're awesome people. And then the second time I had to do it was actually for one of our friends. This is where I'm going to get emotional. So we had 3 of our, and I was supposed to deploy. This is where I get my survivor's guilt that I was talking about a little earlier, and I'll talk about that. But 3 of our friends from my battalion, again, I was supposed to be on this deployment. I had surgery. I couldn't go. So I was pretty bummed out as the XO, I was like, fuck this, like, this is the worst. So I had to, watch all my peers and my friends and all my, coworkers go overseas on this deployment. And a few months in, is April of 2012. They were doing I think they were doing a radio broadcast. They went to this, place in town, wherever they were. And it was in, Maimana, and up near Mazar Sharif, up that way. Anyway, they were doing a mission, and dude on a motorcycle suicide bomber detonated himself and killed 2 of our guys instantly. The third was wounded severely, survived the initial blast, and then passed, I think, at the, when he finally got to the battalion surgeon, the aid station or whatever, he just didn't make it. So Mike and I were sitting in his office, actually, when we got the call, and I just remember sitting there, and they were reading the names. And I remember it was our deputy G1 was reading the names to us, and he just said the names, and I was like, fuck, because they're friends of ours, right? So we know them.
I thought so.
And it was just brutal. you kind of come to the realization that these guys are just gone, you know, because we had started hearing stuff like we knew something happened, and then, you know, get some whispers from people and questions, and then it was just like the realization hits you right in the face, and it was just just devastating. And then, you know, so I was then selected to be the CAO for one of my NCOs, Jeff Rick, and his family. He had a 15-year-old son, ex-wife, and and so like it was just crazy. And so then doing that duty, you know, for that family was, you know, I'd had some experience now, so I knew what I was doing, but didn't make it any easier. You know, and I remember I did go to Dover for that. And I remember getting to the airport, and one of the other guys was a captain. He was the fire support officer for the brigade. And then his NCO IC also was killed. So 2 field artillery guys, and then one of my infantry soldiers. And so they were all on staff, right? And so they were all kind of guys that I'd like tried to, as the XO, I was bringing them in, and I had personally talked to this one guy, Nick Rosansky, who I'd worked with in the jock with Mike. And he had just gotten back, I think, from a deployment or something. And I was like, dude, we really could use you. We need a good FSO, and you're the right guy. And, you know, I don't know that I convinced him, but I think he had conversations with other people. And then he finally, you know, just had a brand new baby and like young family. But he decided to go. And I remember getting to the airport to go to Dover. Here's how I'm going to do it again. And seeing his mom, and they looked alike, you know, so it was like the eyes, you know, and I'm like, fuck. And I remember saying to his mom, I'm like, he had your eyes, you know, and she looked at me and started crying. And so that was really tough. And that's where, you know, like the whole survivor's guilt comes into play. And you know, because I felt like I had some sway on him deciding to do it. But, you know, in reality, I'm sure there was, you know, just overinflated that influence, right? But it didn't make it any easier to kind of think about. And then when you know, see her face and you're like, she just looked, you know, he looked just like you and all that kind of stuff. It was heartbreaking. So, you know, that was pretty significant for our battalion in particular, and for the brigade and all the guys that were over there. And, you know, but what was cool later on, you know, after probably, I don't know, several months, 6 months, maybe a year, after things had kind of calmed down, you get feedback from the battalion and the brigade guys, you know, saying that they had all heard that Mike and myself and Jeff Leslie, who was another CAO, how we did, you know, with the CAO missions, because we, you know, we really, I think we did a really good job as a whole, because we're doing three funerals, you know, together, like within a couple of days of each other. And it was just, we were all just fucked up, you know, it just sucked. So that was really tough, because, you know, we weren't there. You know, we were doing an important mission in the, you know, back home and taking care of the battalion and the brigade and all that. But you just felt, you know, like I should have been there kind of stuff and all that. And not that it maybe would have changed anything, but it's just tough to kind of reconcile that in your head when you felt like you should be there. So that was tough. Yeah, it was really hard.
Yeah, I've never met him, and I've probably the 5th or 6th person who's had a really deep connection with him. So I feel like I've gotten to know him, and he's definitely was a dude that was loved and respected and is missed. And, you know, you should let that go about the survivor's guilt. I mean, from what I've heard is he loved doing what he was doing, and
he did.
wouldn't rather been anywhere else. So
you know, it's
you cut yourself a break a little bit. You know?
I know, but it's one of those things, you know, and his family was they're such a great family, like that whole family. Sean's family, you know, Nick's family, Jeff's family, all were great. but I would say the Rosansky family as a whole was they just rallied so much, and they, created this foundation. They're still doing golf outings and all that stuff that they do. And it's very important. He was a big part of the Dublin community. And, and I haven't seen his family in many years. And I know his kids are probably, they're probably teenagers now. They are teenagers now, and it's like, hopefully they're doing great and being successful and living in his image, because he was a great guy. He was a super guy. He's funny as shit, sarcastic. We gave him shit all the time. I don't know if I should tell this story, but he had any war crimes. No. Like, remember he had that thing on his head? Remember that? Yeah. He had this like this thing on his head. He was growing like I don't know, it was like had a cyst or something. And like we fucked with him relentlessly, right? But he would get his hair cut and it would like get nicked, and he'd be like, Nick got nicked, it was like, but he took it in stride. He was a good dude. But and we had other friends that were working there, and one of his friends named his son after him and all that kind of stuff. So it's just
like I said, I noticed I've met him, but I mean, you guys, he's probably watching down and looking at you guys, and it's he's a guy who was, I can tell, was loved in life, and is loved in death. And like you said, we'll post the foundation again. We think we brought him up before in the past, but definitely doing a great thing. And I know the feeling, when someone that impacted so many people, how the world would be without them. Talk about a good friend of mine, Mike Green. I used to have a lot of guilt on that and anger, but I just try to focus now on the good parts of his life and how how much of an impact he made when he was alive. And
for sure,
I would love to see what the world was like with him in it now.
Oh my God,
it would be
awesome.
It'd be great.
All our brothers and sisters that have been lost, and just but I think a lot of times they live on through their family members and all the things that they're doing, and so it's all good.
The survivor guilt thing's interesting. I think that a lot of us have that. And you talk about it. And the crazy thing is, I was, I don't remember who told me, but I kind of live by it, is that, I don't think any of them, wherever they're at, whatever you believe in, is like, it's got saying, shit, I wish it was Che, not me. You know what I mean?
No, of course.
And, so that's another thing. I mean, maybe they are, I don't know, but,
right. Fucker.
It could be.
You should be here, son of a bitch. Right?
God damn it. But
I know.
Maybe I should take that back. I'm not going to think that. I'm going to stick with my original thought.
That fucker should be here with me, man.
No, but I think that's an important thing to remember. It's like all of us, we're doing what we want to do. And we can somehow, it's very easy to assign some kind of blame to ourselves, to, say we impacted this or that. But, ultimately, we're still in all through this time for the 2 wars for 40 plus years, we all were volunteering for it. So we all made the decision. We all knew what we're doing. So you got to cut yourself a break. And like I said, they really, I think you guys are doing a hell of a job honoring him for the man he was and the sacrifice he made. And it's
unbelievably good.
I feel like whenever it's unbelievable how many times I've had people talk about it on the podcast, and then just his death made a huge impact on the Ohio Army National Guard and people here in Ohio. It's pretty great. I think Josh put up the foundation, and they're doing a great thing as well too.
Awesome. So it was cool. I mean, just the legacy those guys have. And they're, especially in our battalion, the 148, they were just, they epitomized what it was, So our battalion motto is "We'll do it," So it kind of fits that, those are the kind of guys that would do it. And they were there. So, and
I thank you for that job. It's a tough job.
It was greatest honors of my life. Those 2 situations. I mean, as tough as they were, I can't really say enough how rewarding it's like one of those weird kind of dichotomies of it's a horrible thing to have to do, but it's so rewarding when you do it right, and the family is even slightly more at peace than they were when you got there. That's the rewarding part of it. So,
and it's a part that I don't think a lot of people know. Even on active duty, you have when you're on the green cycle, you're on casualty assistance officer. I mean, one of my fellow platoon leaders, when I was at Hood, had to go, and then I was on the hook for it a lot, but just it wasn't
Yeah,
at the time things weren't happening for that to do. But yeah, it is. You know, I think anybody that's done that is a tough job, and it's an important job, and a lot of people don't talk about it. So
yeah, it's cool.
You know, being able to bring our brothers and sisters home is obviously an honor, and
unreal.
And thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it was like I said, it was an honor. So good stuff. Tough.
I knew you'd start to cry. I knew it. Okay, that's great. I'm glad you got it out.
Yeah, I'm one of those, like, I have a hard
right.
time talking when I start getting emotional.
It's great.
So I just have to take a pause. But yeah, that was tough. Yeah, but well worth it. So,
and thank you for sharing that, man. Being honest and raw.
Yeah, man. I mean, you know, and that's the thing. Like, I think we talk about some of these, you know, some of the issues that our peers and brothers and sisters deal with on a daily basis. It's like, you know, you got to be able to just talk about it, you know, whether that's with family or friends or just people you don't even know. I don't know if you're fucking talking on the street, probably think you're crazy, but at least you get it out, right? So, like, it's worth having the conversations.
Yeah, no, those things to talk about. You know, it's a big thing we talked about a lot on Port with Patriots and all the guests is, you know, especially when it comes to, you know, when it's getting dark for you and you don't think, you know, you want to be around anymore. You just got to talk to somebody and so quickly you realize, man, a lot of people feel the same exact way you do.
Yep.
Sometimes it just takes one person to have the courage to start the conversation. And then before you know it, you're like, you know, that believe it or not, you know, that sharing, that shared vulnerability is huge. So, and that's not, you know, with anything, like we said earlier, like just talk about how you feel and
you know, it doesn't do any good to bottle it up. I mean, it's just best to, you know, just get it out, talk about it, you know. It may suck to even bring it up at times, but it's, you know, it's cathartic, I guess, probably the best way to put it in some ways. You know, just being able to have that conversation. And I'd like tonight, it's going to be helpful for me just to have that conversation about those guys and you know, like you said, let it go because, you know, like you said, they volunteered at some point, you know, whether it was initially or later or whatever. But, you know, it's good. It's good to have that conversation.
Yeah. It's, you know, crying, you know,
yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
If guys were told it's, you know, I can't tell you how many times I mean, I cry it.
Oh, dude, I watch commercials on TV.
The Vault in Sunbury. If you want to come there on Sunday and see me do it, Joe's been there.
You get the right commercial on television. I'm fucking what the fuck? Why am I crying right now?
It's funny. I mean, up until, you know, about a certain time and, you know, about a year and a half, I would fight that, right? I would, like, if I would start crying at something, I'd, you know, adjust your glasses or something, you know, like, and, you know, be like, I'm not crying about that. No, now I'm like,
eyes are tired. Shit.
No, or you like put your blanket up. You're like, why am I crying about this?
The dog, you know, the commercial was so cute. I don't understand.
I don't think there's some movies that get me. I don't know. Anything to do with the military is always sad. You know what I mean, when you see it, especially like the casualty assistance stuff, where you hear stories like you hear the wrong thing.
You see that movie with
which one?
With Taking Chance?
You know, I've never seen it. Now it's going to be on my reel, so I feel like it's been on there like crazy.
It's pretty good. I mean, he's a Marine. You know, Marines. But he does a great job. No, it's awesome.
No, I've seen some clips for it. I was looking at the other day. Actually, I can watch it. I think you can watch it on.
Yeah, I think it's like Netflix or something.
Hulu,
one of those. Yeah, one of those.
I think my oldest son has Hulu, but he's never around anymore to get his password. I'll have to figure it out. Shake him down for it. So I'm like, I'm not paying for it all. So I'll probably watch it this weekend now.
Good.
But
really good.
That's actually the first movie I thought of when I was reading your bio on it. So
it's really good. Really good.
So 30 years is a lot. We're close on, approaching 2 hours here. So anything else on your 30-year career that we missed that you want to chat about?
I mean, you know, it's just accumulation of, you know, lots of fun memories and, you know, stupid stuff you do. And like one quick story I'll relate to you is we were doing advanced land nav at Fort Benning during my I think it was my career course, or it might have been OBC, either way. Down there, Lightning Road land nav course. If you're an infantry guy, you've probably done that a few times. But we're out there and we're doing this advanced nav. It was basically buddy team land nav, right? So like one guy had a rucksack and a rifle, and the other guy was like navigating, right? And then we'd switch off or whatever. And it was like, instead of like a 300 meter, you know, point, it was 1,000 meter point. So it was much longer, you know, navigation. and it went overnight, and you had OPFOR out. So you're wearing miles gear, and they could kill you. You know, if you got too close to the road, they'd kill you, and then you lose a point. So you got to go to another point, right? So, so we're doing this, and you also weren't supposed to collaborate, but you know, like you fucking run into dudes on the course, like, hey man, let's go. We're going to that point too. So I ran into my buddy David that I was telling you about, big Polish dude from Buffalo, New York, and his battle buddy was a former fullback from like Mississippi, like University of Mississippi. Big motherfucker, Johnson. He was like a bowling ball. And then my buddy, he was just kind of doing his thing. And like, so we were, all right, we're going to go to this point. And we're on the route. And, you know, we come to these big creeks at Fort Benning. They're like these big washout creeks. They're probably 7 or 8 feet deep, but they're really like, you know, narrow across. They're really not too far across, but they're really deep. So you have to like either find a nice way in where it's a little easier to get around. And so you're getting off you're starting to bracket your point, you're in your azimuth and all that stuff. So we're like, all right, let's fucking try to go straight across. And there's big jungle vines that grow down at Fort Benning. Right. So we're like, my buddy's like, oh, let's fucking Tarzan this thing. Right. And we're like, all right. So, you know, David goes, like I said, he's like 220 probably at that time, but all lean. And he's got, you know, he's gets this fucking vine. He's like yanking on it, looking up and like testing it. And then he just takes it, you know, pulls it back, takes a running start, swings across the creek. No problem. Right. Johnson goes, he does the same thing, makes it across. And then my buddy, he's like, I'm going around. I'm like, all right, fine. So he's off trying to find another way around. And I'm like, I'm the last dude. So I do the same thing. I look up, test the vine, you know, and I get this running start, and like I take off the ground, and then all of a sudden it's like, there's no resistance on this vine anymore. And I'm in the air, and I'm falling now, and I'm falling into the motherfucking creek, you know? So I land flat on my back in this creek, and, you know, I'm just soaking wet, and we're like barely halfway through this course. And, you know, it's just, those are those moments in your career. Like you're at the moment, you're like, motherfucker, this is the dumbest shit I've ever done in my life, you know? And, but then, you know, like then your buddies are laughing at you. You're like, you dumbass, you know, and they're just giggling, and you're like coming out all wet and red clay and shit all over you. And you got to climb out of the gully. And it was just, you know, they're just laughing their balls off, you know? And so, you know, it was one of those just lessons in humility, you know, like it was fucking hilarious for them. It was not funny for me at the time, but then you look back a few years later and you're laughing your ass off. So, you know, those are the things that I really like, that are in my head, that I have in me, that I could relate. But it's really hard to like pull all of that stuff out over a 30-year career and kind of like communicate it. But, you know, if we had more time, obviously a couple more drinks, it'd be flowing. But those are the best times, and just being around the boys, and it's just good stuff. You know,
the best time, the worst time, but the best time
right
at the time. There, I think we all talk about it. Like at the time, it seems like
you're all in this suck
the
together.
Worst thing, and people are bitching and complaining. Why the hell are we doing it? And then like in a blink of eye, I think we'd all go back and be I would love to go do that again and deal with that. And
you know, besides being away from family and those kind of things, the shared, you know, shared experiences, the camaraderie, the fun, you know, some of the hard times, it all goes into that experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
I think that's the hard time, you know, we get out as you are around, you know, brothers and sisters, like really tight, like you just experience everything. It's like hard to explain if you've never been there. I mean, there's just hours of being with people, and you want to beat the shit out of them, and the next minute you want to hug them, and like then like, you know, just things happen, and like everybody in the, like, I love everybody in the military, no matter what it is. You're just like, there's some point you're like, why in the fuck, like I'm like, why are we doing, like, why did I volunteer for this? Like this is totally ridiculous. And then and if somebody then at the time, and then later on, if everybody talks about it, you're like, shut your mouth, you don't know. It's the best. You don't know, it's like the whole, you know, it's it is like the what is the saying, like the worst time, best time.
The worst time is the best.
It depends on it depends on your perspective. But every time you look back at it now, it's always that was great, and you're just like
at the time.
Like,
it
but
really
I always
fucking
think about it
sucked.
too. If I had to go back to like JRTC and some of that stuff, I'm like,
Oh, yeah.
like there is no, like today I bit it on the ice and I'm like, the way I felt falling,
Oh.
I was like, I can imagine jumping out of an airplane,
Oh.
how it would feel right now. So I'm thinking like, I wouldn't be able to walk.
You wouldn't be, you wouldn't get
Yeah,
up.
I was like,
right?
I was
know.
like, oh.
I did that. I did this. I was actually at Home Fells. I went back for a minute to go train the unit that was coming to replace us in K4. And I did the same thing. Slipped on fucking ice. It was snowing. And they parked this Humvee. They parked their Humvees outside I was working with the OPFOR guys, right? And so they parked their Humvees in this parking lot and somebody had like spun their tires and they dug a trough in the parking lot, right? It's snow and ice. And we'd gone to the PX, gotten some coffee. We're going to go get our briefing for the day. And I step out of the fucking Humvee right in that little trough. And I go literally ass, feet over ass, like I'm fucking in the air again, like coffee's coming. I'm like looking at the coffee slow-mo coming in my face. And, I'm like, that really sounded bad. Dude, yeah. Sorry. But anyway, like the coffee comes out of the cup.
We know you liked it. It's okay.
So, it's good. But yeah, anyway, so have to go on that tangent.
So we'll end with the serious question. Yeah. So, obviously 30 years you've seen, you've dealt with your own PTS and seen it in other people.
Yeah.
So in your opinion, with all the focus that's on, the warrior, veteran class mental health, what is, in your opinion, what is not being done that needs to be done?
I think we definitely made improvements over the years, right? It's getting better, but I think it's still, I don't know, because I can't say this for sure, but I've never really kind of stepped out and like tried to find some of those resources per se. But I would say it's just, I think the key is connecting, more with people and having the opportunities to connect with people, whatever that forum is. I don't know what kind of forum, it might be, but I think just the outreach and reducing the stigma about it too. That's key. I think overall, just for soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, whatever, it doesn't matter what branch you're in, just find somebody that, if you're having issues and talk to somebody. And I think it's just, it's probably not enough of, people saying it's okay to have that struggle and to go and find help, because, I think that's the biggest challenge is we're so, and I don't know. I mean, again, our generation of going to basic and things like that, it was a little different, I think that it's become a little bit more of an issue where, it's talked about more now. So I don't know that the mindset of the new generation of soldiers and service members is different, but I still think there's stigma about reaching out. So I think just at leadership levels is making sure that everybody understands. I don't care what rank you are. And this is something that I've always, like, as a leader, I never really tried to put, because I came up as an enlisted guy, right? So I don't think I ever really put a barrier as an officer between me and my soldiers. I always wanted to make sure my soldiers knew I was there for them. And, whether that made me a bad leader in the eyes of my superiors, I don't really fucking care, because I think, to me, the proof is in the pudding. I still stay in contact with a lot of my soldiers. I still think I have good relationships with them. I'm sure I did some things to piss some guys off, right? But who doesn't? But I think if I had my way, I would have more people doing those things and connecting with your soldiers on an individual and personal level versus being, the standoffish, you were explaining, like, you had that situation where you were like, I can't fucking talk to this kid. I got to be hard on this kid or whatever. Yeah. But, you can be hard on them, but you can also care about them. And going back to my Woody Hayes quote, I always, whenever I transition out of a position or whatever, I always, I would always say you win with people. So if you, and our ATAG, Assistant Adjutant General for Army, is also, he kind of goes the people first mission, always sort of meant, mantra. So that's our current, senior leader in the Army National Guard right now. So that mindset is there now more so than I think it was in the past. But I think if leaders are willing to talk to, listen to, engage with on a personal level with your soldiers, your service members, then that's another step. So I think more of that is important. I think, just again, making people aware of all the resources that are out there for them is really important. So,
yeah, I think that, it's interesting, about, when I've asked that question, it like rolls through my head about what I think. And one of the things that comes to mind is like, we're trained on all these things, how to deal with everything. And I don't remember anybody ever talking to me about my mental health other than saying like, whatever you're feeling, don't say anything because, it's going to get you in trouble.
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. There's, I mean, and it happened, like in Iraq, you see guys, go see behavioral health. And the next thing you know, like I had a couple guys that like literally poof, they went to behavioral health one day and poof, they're gone the next. Like, and I didn't have, as a commander, I didn't have any say in it. They were like, whatever their issue was, they got evac back CONUS, right? So, it's just awareness and more, more outlets and resources for people, I think. Is really important.
And I've always said, no, it was a big component, like you said, the communication, it's got to start with the person that's, not, it's an individual thing, right? Sure, if you're having that, you got to have the courage to talk about it. You gotta be resilient.
And having the courage is important, but I think also understanding that you're not going to nobody's going to judge you because you're having that issue. And I think that a lot of times too, is that people that really care about their careers too, they don't want to bring it up because they're afraid that it's going to, somehow derail that. Right. And I think we have to be supportive of, not immediately going to guns and taking somebody away from something that they really love as their career, just because they've communicated they are having an issue. And I mean, at a certain point, there's probably, a line where it has to be determined that, that you might have to be separated or whatever. But generally speaking, people still care about you, as long as you're willing to, accept the help, you know what I mean? So.
And sometimes, the reality of it is that, if your own mental health in your own life, it sometimes does mean you can't function in that job or that profession, unfortunately. But, that's something you could deal with, as long as it's better to deal with that than to, make a permanent decision for a temporary problem. So
exactly. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Chris, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
We had another guest come sneaking in. Former guest here.
So I was like,
it's a good surprise to see him sneaking in. I haven't
seen Tim in a long time.
Now I know why the dogs were barking like crazy, but it's like, I'm like, what is my family doing up there?
Hell?
Yeah.
No,
it all makes sense.
It's good to see some good friends, good faces.
But thank you for coming on. Thank you for thank you for sharing. Again, most importantly, thank you for your courage to be real and honest. It means a lot to show your emotion, and
appreciate it.
And again, thank you. I'm sure you've heard it many times, but thank you for your service to our nation.
You as well. Thank you.
31 years is a very significant amount of time.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been good times, hard times, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't trade it for anything. So appreciate it.
So we're going to move into the part of the night that I don't like, but it's an important part of the night. So tonight we're going to honor U.S. Army Staff Sergeant Chad Corwin DeFreitas, 42. Chad was born on January 29th, 1978 in Taylorsville, Illinois. Chad took his life on January 10th, 2021 at Fort Mitchell, Alabama. After graduating high school, Chad enlisted in the United States Marine Corps and later served in the United States Army. During his 20-year military career, Chad served both overseas and stateside and deployed to the Persian Gulf and Iraq. Chad's awards and decorations include the Meritorious Service Medal, Army Commendation Medal, Army Achievement Medal, Army Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal, Armed Forces Service Medal, Iraq Campaign Medal, and the Black Medallion of the Order of St. George. Chad was an avid outdoorsman and felt most like himself when he was in nature. Chad loved hunting, fishing, and riding dirt bikes. Chad was a creative and gifted chef who made amazing barbecue. He will be remembered as a devoted son, loving brother, dedicated and loving husband and father, a true patriot who was loyal in service to his country and his brothers in arms. Chad is survived by his wife, Jennifer, sons Trenton and Nathan, daughter Allison, mother Linda and her husband, Dave, sister Megan, stepbrother Chad and his wife, Lola, and numerous other relatives and friends. And remember, if you or someone you know is in crisis and might be considering suicide, please contact the Veterans Crisis Hotline at 988 or 1-800-273-8255 and press 1, or you can text 838-255, or you can chat online at veterancrisisline.net/chat. So, we will, that's going to bring us to the end of episode 69. We will see everyone in a couple weeks. Thank you for everybody that tuned in, and we will see you soon. Thanks. Have a great night.
Awesome. Thanks.